Welcome to a journey through the rattling bones and hollow laughter of Clash Royale's most enduring warriors. Tonight, we delve deep into the realm where death is merely a beginning, where bones march eternal across arenas bathed in moonlight and magic. This is the complete story of skeletons, those fragile yet fierce fighters who have captured hearts worldwide, despite having none themselves. Close your eyes if you wish. Let the gentle rhythm of their skeletal footsteps lull you into dreams. For in the arena, the skeletons never truly rest, and neither does their legend. The legacy of bones, an introduction to skeleton lore in the beginning. When Clash Royale first emerged from the creative minds at Supercell on January 4th, 2016, the skeletons were already there, waiting. They had existed before in Clash of Clans, those tiny undead servants of the witch, but in this new arena, they would become so much more. They would become icons, memes, champions, and above all, beloved by millions of players who saw in their fragile forms a reflection of underdog determination. The skeleton, scientifically speaking, takes its name from the Greek word skeletos, meaning dried up or withered. But there's nothing withered about the spirit of these warriors. From the moment the first skeleton spawned onto an arena battlefield, clattering its tiny sword against shields 10 times its size, players recognized something special. Here was a troop that cost merely 1 elixir, the smallest investment possible, yet could shift the entire tide of battle with perfect placement and timing. Consider for a moment the philosophy embodied by these warriors. They are already dead, having crossed that threshold from which most feared to return. Yet they march on, driven by forces we can only imagine. Are they animated by dark magic? By ancient curses? By the will of the witch who birthed them? Or perhaps, as the lore quietly suggests, by something deeper, something that resonates with every player who has felt outmatched yet chose to fight anyway. The skeleton units in Clash Royale appear as small undead creatures with skulls that lack a lower jaw. Their purple eyes glow with an ethereal light that suggests awareness beyond mere animation. They wield short swords, crude but effective weapons in their bony hands. Their appearance is deceptively simple, almost comical, with their bobbing heads and scrambling movements. But any seasoned player knows the truth. Underestimate a skeleton at your peril. From the very first day of Clash Royale soft launch, skeletons have been present in multiple forms. The 3 skeleton card, the skeleton army with its overwhelming numbers, the giant skeleton carrying its devastating bomb, the witch perpetually summoning more, and later additions like the skeleton barrel, evolved variations, and ultimately the skeleton king himself. Each represents a different facet of skeleton lore, a different chapter in their ongoing story. What makes skeletons so captivating is their duality. They are simultaneously the weakest and most versatile troops in the entire game. A single zap can erase them from existence. A well-placed log can sweep them away like autumn leaves. Yet properly deployed, these same fragile warriors can demolish a prince's charge, overwhelm a P.E.K.K.A., or deliver devastating damage to a tower. They embody the strategic heart of Clash Royale itself, where positioning and timing matter more than raw power, where intelligence defeats brute force, where the smallest investment can yield the greatest returns. Throughout the years since 2016, skeletons have undergone numerous balance changes, each one documented and analyzed by the community. They've been 4 skeletons, then 3, then 4 again, then back to 3. The skeleton army has swelled and shrunk, costing 4 elixir, then 3. Every change sparked discussion, debate, and adaptation. Yet through it all, the essential nature of skeletons remained unchanged. They are fragile warriors, whose strength lies not in individual power, but in numbers, speed, and the clever minds controlling them. But beyond the statistics and balance changes, beyond the strategic discussions and deck compositions, there exists a deeper narrative. The skeletons have names. They have personalities implied through animations and community interpretations. They have a culture that has evolved through official Supercell content, fan creations, animations, and the collective imagination of millions of players worldwide. They are not merely game pieces, but characters in an ongoing story, one that begins with a single skeleton named Larry. Larry, the original skeleton legend. If there is one skeleton whose name echoes through the halls of Clash Royale history louder than all others, it is Larry. To understand skeleton lore, we must understand Larry, for he is both beginning and symbol, everyman and legend. The ordinary made extraordinary through circumstance and community affection. Larry's story begins not in Clash Royale, but in Clash of Clans, in a commercial that would become legendary in the Supercell community. In this advertisement, a witch spawns a skeleton to assist in raiding an enemy village. The skeleton, small and seemingly insignificant, approaches an archer tower. The witch, seeing potential disaster, repeatedly warns the skeleton. "Don't touch that, Larry." "Larry, no, Larry." But Larry, driven by curiosity, or perhaps destiny, touches the archer tower anyway. The result is catastrophic chaos. The tower begins firing, the arrows missing their intended target but striking a balloon passing overhead. The balloon, now damaged and descending, crashes directly into the enemy village's elixir storage. Purple elixir spills everywhere, flooding the battlefield in a tide of magical energy. The entire raid dissolves into pandemonium, all because one small skeleton couldn't resist touching what he shouldn't. This commercial, simple in concept but perfect in execution, achieved something remarkable. It gave personality to a previously nameless unit. Larry became real in that moment, not just a game piece, but a character with agency, curiosity, and the kind of innocent mischief that endears rather than annoys. The name Larry itself, so ordinary and unassuming, perfectly captured the essence of this every skeleton. This representative of all the little warriors who march into battle knowing they're outmatched. The Clash Royale community embraced Larry immediately and completely. Memes flourished. Fan art proliferated. Discussions about strategy often personified the skeletons, referring to sending in Larry and his friends, rather than merely deploying skeletons. The name appeared in official Supercell content, cementing its place in the canon. When Skeleton Army received an updated description, it read, "Spawns an army of skeletons. Meet Larry and his friends Harry, Gary, Terry, Mary, etc." Each of these names carries its own small personality in the community imagination. Harry, perhaps the brave one. Gary, later to become the general in evolved form. Terry, the troublemaker. Mary, breaking skeleton gender norms and showing the bones are bones regardless. And the etc. that follows acknowledges the countless other skeletons, each potentially having their own untold stories, their own moments of glory or comedy in the arena. But Larry's legend grew beyond simple name recognition. The animated short film Lost and Crowned elevated him to protagonist status. In this beautifully crafted piece of storytelling, Larry and his brother Peter work for the Red King in the Clash Royale arena. The plot revolves around Larry's fascination with the Red King's crown, his curiosity, that same trait that led him to touch the Archer Tower in the commercial, draws him to steal the crown. What follows is an adventure through trap-filled chambers, encounters with fire spirits that lead to explosive consequences, a tense journey into a dragon's lair, and ultimately the crown's return, though damaged beyond repair. Larry and Peter face punishment, reduced to washing dishes, but they survive their ordeal together. The short film does something crucial for skeleton lore. It shows skeletons having relationships, making choices, experiencing emotions like curiosity, fear, and brotherly bond. The theory that Larry eventually becomes the Skeleton King adds another layer to his legend. When the champion cards were introduced to Clash Royale in October 2021, the Skeleton King emerged as one of the first 3 champions, alongside the Golden Knight and Archer Queen. This massive skeleton warrior, wearing a crown and wielding a club, possesses the power to collect souls and raise fallen troops as skeletons. The visual connection between the Skeleton King as crown and the crown Larry stole him lost and crowned sparked immediate speculation among fans. Could Larry, the small skeleton who touched things he shouldn't and stole a crown, have somehow ascended to become the king of all skeletons? The timeline fits if you squint. The crown was damaged but not destroyed. Magic saturates the Clash universe. Transformation and evolution are core game mechanics. The idea that a simple skeleton might rise to royalty through circumstances both comic and tragic appeals to the underdog narrative that makes Larry so beloved. Whether the theory is officially canon or not, the Clash Royale community has largely embraced it. Fan animations, edits, and artwork frequently depict Larry's transformation into the Skeleton King. The narrative resonates because it follows a classic story arc. The smallest among us, through curiosity and adventure, becomes something greater. Larry represents potential, the idea that even the most insignificant unit in the game might have a destiny beyond its initial deployment. In competitive play, Larry has become shorthand for skeleton strategy itself. High-level players discussing replays will say things like, "He baited the zap with Larry, then cycled back to hog," as naturally as if Larry were an official game term. Tournament casters reference him. Strategy guides acknowledge his cultural significance. Larry has transcended his status as meme to become part of the game's actual vocabulary. The Larry phenomenon also reflects something deeper about gaming communities. Players naturally seek to personify, to create narrative where pure mechanics exist. We don't just want to deploy units, we want to command warriors. We don't merely want to win. We want our victories to mean something, to be stories we can tell. Larry provides that narrative hook, that entry point into seeing the arena not as an abstract battlefield, but as a stage where characters we care about perform their roles. Social media has amplified Larry's legend. TikTok videos explaining how Larry became the Skeleton King rack up millions of views. YouTube animations showing Larry's adventures attract dedicated fan bases. Reddit threads debate the finer points of skeleton lore with genuine passion. Instagram fan art depicts Larry in countless scenarios, from comic moments to epic battles. The skeleton has become a brand unto himself, recognizable even to people who have never played Clash Royale. What's particularly fascinating is how Supercell has responded to this organic growth of lore. Rather than strictly controlling the narrative or dismissing fan theories, they've leaned into it. Official content references Larry. Emotes and cosmetics celebrate skeleton culture. The company seems to understand that the community's creative engagement with their game, their building of stories and meaning around skeletal warriors, makes the game richer for everyone. Larry's story, from commercial to icon, demonstrates the power of character in game design. You don't need complex backstories or cutscenes to create memorable characters. Sometimes all it takes is a name, a moment of personality, and the imagination of millions of players who want to believe that yes, this tiny skeleton matters. Larry matters. Every skeleton matters. And when you deploy them onto the arena, you're not just using a one elixir distraction. You're sending brave warriors into battle. Warriors with names and stories. Warriors who chose to fight despite knowing they're made of fragile bones. In the quiet of night, when you're falling asleep to tales of Clash Royale, remember Larry. Remember the skeleton who couldn't resist curiosity, who caused chaos, who stole a crown, who became a king. His story reminds us that even the smallest among us might be destined for greatness. Even when we feel fragile, brittle, easily broken, we can still charge forward with sword raised, ready to face whatever towers and troops await. And perhaps that's why Larry resonates so deeply, because we've all felt like that one elixir skeleton, small and vulnerable in a world of giants and wizards. Yet we march on anyway, hoping our timing is right, our placement perfect, our contribution meaningful. We are all Larry, in the end. And Larry is eternal. The Skeletons card. 3 warriors, infinite possibilities. Let us now turn our attention to the card itself. The humble Skeletons card that has been part of Clash Royale since its very first day of existence. This common card, unlocked from the Bone Pit, which is Arena 2, costs just 1 elixir to deploy. For that minimal investment, you receive 3 fast, single target, ground targeting melee troops with very low hit points and very low damage. On paper, they sound almost worthless. In practice, they are one of the most versatile and valuable cards in the entire game. The visual design of the Skeletons is deceptively simple, yet perfectly executed. They appear as small, undead creatures, their skulls distinctively lacking a lower jaw, giving them a permanent appearance of surprise or perhaps a skeletal grin. Their purple eyes glow with otherworldly energy, marking them as beings animated by magic rather than natural life. Each skeleton wields a short sword, a weapon proportional to their size, perfect for their quick, stabbing attacks. They wear no armor, no protection, nothing but bones held together by dark sorcery. When you deploy the Skeletons card, they spawn in a triangle formation, appearing simultaneously in an arrangement that allows them to quickly surround and attack from multiple angles. This formation is crucial to their effectiveness. Against single-target troops, the Skeletons can attack from 3 directions at once, maximizing their collective damage output. Against area-damaged troops, the triangle formation at least ensures they don't all die to a single hit, though many area damage attacks can still eliminate all 3 with proper timing. The historical evolution of the Skeletons card tells its own story of balance and community response. When Clash Royale launched on January 4th, 2016, the card originally spawned 4 skeletons. For months, players learned to utilize this 4-skeleton swarm, developing strategies around their numerical advantage. Then on June 21st, 2016, a balance update decreased the count to 3, fundamentally changing how the card functioned. The description shifted from 4 fast, very weak melee fighters to 3 fast, very weak melee fighters, and the word swarm became surround to reflect their diminished numbers. The community adapted, as communities do, finding new ways to leverage 3 skeletons instead of 4. But the story didn't end there. On February 13th, 2017, another balance update increased the count back to 4 skeletons. Players celebrated the return of the 4th warrior, adjusting their strategies once again. This lasted until November 2nd, 2017, when yet another balance update reduced them back to 3 skeletons, where they have remained since. These changes might seem arbitrary to casual observers, but they represented careful attempts by Supercell to balance one of the game's most fundamental cards. 4 skeletons for 1 elixir proved too strong, providing too much defensive value and cycle speed. 3 skeletons hit a sweet spot where they remained useful, but required more skill to extract maximum value. The back-and-forth nature of these changes also demonstrates how difficult game balance is, how even seemingly small adjustments can ripple through the entire meta. Beyond these count changes, the skeletons received numerous other adjustments over the years. February 19th, 2016 saw their hit points and damage increased by 11%. May 18th, 2016 brought another 5% increase. The March 2016 update decreased their sight range from 6 tiles to 5.5 tiles. The May 2016 update fixed the infamous range bug that had given troops slightly more range than intended, decreasing skeleton range from 0.75 tiles to 0.5 tiles, though their effective range remained unchanged due to how the bug worked. Most recently, on October 6, 2025, a balance update increased the skeleton's attack time interval to 1.1 seconds from 1 second, making them attack slightly slower. Each of these changes affected how skeletons performed in battle, how players deployed them, what matchups they excelled or struggled in. The competitive community analyzed every adjustment, theory-crafted new deck compositions, and gradually discovered optimal usage patterns. High-level play evolved alongside the skeletons themselves, with professional players pioneering techniques that would filter down through the ranks to casual players. The strategic applications of the skeleton's card are wonderfully diverse. Their most obvious use is a distraction for medium to high hit point units. Against troops like Prince, Inferno Dragon, Peke, Mighty Miner, Sparky, or Mini Peke, the skeletons can surround and distract, buying precious seconds for your towers to deal damage while preventing or resetting charge abilities. A perfectly timed skeleton deployment can stop a Prince mid-charge, negating thousands of damage for a 1 elixir investment. Against building targeting troops that cannot fight back effectively, like Hog Rider or Ram Rider, skeletons provide substantial damage per second relative to their cost. While the skeletons alone won't fully counter such troops, they slow them down significantly, often securing the difference between the tower taking 1 hit or 2, between winning and losing close matches. 3 small skeletons stabbing away at a hog's flanks might look comical, but those tiny swords add up. In offensive scenarios, skeletons serve multiple purposes. They can tank tower shots from more valuable units, sacrificing themselves so your musketeer or wizard stays alive longer. They can support a tank push, adding their modest damage to the death ball rolling toward enemy towers. They can split push, drawing defensive attention to one lane while your main attack develops in another. At just 1 elixir, you can afford to throw skeletons at problems speculatively, testing opponent responses or cycle through your deck quickly. The psychological dimension of skeleton deployment shouldn't be underestimated either. Experienced players learn to predict skeleton placements, holding spells or timing area damage specifically to counter them. This creates mind games where you might fake a skeleton deployment, causing opponents to waste spells preemptively. Or you might deploy skeletons in unusual positions, places where opponents expect other troops, throwing off their timing. The humble skeletons become tools not just of combat, but of deception. Perhaps most importantly, skeletons are the ultimate cycle card. In cycle decks built around quickly returning to your win condition, skeletons allow you to rotate through your hand faster than almost any other option. You can deploy them defensively, extract value, and find yourself back to your Hog Rider or Miner or Royal Giant 1 card sooner. Over the course of a match, that acceleration compounds, potentially giving you multiple additional attacks with your primary win condition. The community has developed extensive shorthand for skeleton plays. Larry and Friends Stop the Prince is understood to mean distracting with skeletons. Cycling skeletons at the bridge refers to throwing them offensively just to progress through your deck. Skeleton kiting describes pulling enemy troops toward the center using skeleton placement, maximizing tower damage. These phrases, used thousands of times daily across forums, streams, and Discord servers, constitute a shared language built around 3 small undead warriors. The skeletons that spawn from the dedicated skeletons card are identical to those spawned by the Witch, Tombstone, Skeleton Barrel, Skeleton Army, Graveyard, and Super Witch. This creates interesting strategic interactions. If your opponent uses Witch, you already know exactly how much damage each skeleton deals, how much health they have, how they'll behave. The consistency across all skeleton generating sources makes them predictable, which actually enhances their utility because predictability enables precise calculation. One fascinating detail: even though the skeleton's card spawns 3 warriors, the card render displays only 1 skeleton. This single representative skeleton has become iconic, appearing in emotes, clan badges, battle banners, and countless pieces of fan art. That one skeleton depicted mid-stride with sword raised somehow captures the essence of all skeletons everywhere. It is Larry and Harry and Gary and Terry and Mary. It is every skeleton that ever charged courageously into battle despite knowing that a strong sneeze could disperse them back to the netherworld. The skeletons have been featured in numerous special game modes beyond standard battles. They've appeared in Troop Rush, where their speed and cost made them particularly valuable. They've been part of special challenge formats. They've been buffed in temporary modes, receiving crazy bonuses like rage or damage multipliers that transform them from fragile distractions into actual threats. Each mode offered new perspectives on these familiar warriors, showing what they might be capable of under different rules. In the grand narrative of Clash Royale, the basic Skeletons card represents something essential. These are the common soldiers, the unnamed masses. The ones who fight not because they're legendary or epic, but because fighting is their purpose. They are the proof that rarity doesn't determine worth. The common can be extraordinary with proper application. Every legendary card in your deck might grab attention, but those 3 skeletons costing 1 elixir might be the difference between victory and defeat. As you drift towards sleep, imagine the skeletons marshalling in formation. 3 warriors, bones clicking softly as they ready their swords. They know they're fragile. They know powerful enemies await. They know a single spell could erase them from existence. Yet when you deploy them, they charge forward without hesitation, doing their duty, playing their role, proving that even the smallest contribution matters in the grand scheme of battle. They are soldiers, eternal. The skeleton swarm reduced to its essential triangle, and they are magnificent precisely because they ask for so little, yet give so much. The Skeletons card is simplicity itself. 3 warriors for 1 elixir, but within that simplicity lies infinite complexity. Every match, every deployment, every interaction is unique. The same 3 skeletons, yet different every time. Constant, yet ever-changing. Small, yet significant. Dead, yet more alive in community imagination than many games' most elaborate characters. And so they march on, these 3 warriors. Larry, probably, and 2 of his many friends. Into the arena, into legend, into dreams where bones rattle like wind chimes and purple eyes glow in darkness. The Skeletons card, humble beginning and eternal presence, foundational and irreplaceable. Sleep now and let them stand watch. They've defended towers for years. They can certainly guard your dreams. Skeleton Army. Meet Larry's extended family when 3 skeletons aren't enough. When the situation demands overwhelming force rather than surgical precision. When you need not a squad but an army, there exists a card that answers that call. The Skeleton Army, unlocked from PEKK's Playhouse, which is Arena 6, spawns 15 skeletons in a scattered formation for 3 elixir. This is where Larry truly brings the family reunion, where names like Harry, Gary, Terry, and Mary are joined by Barry, Cherry, Carrie, Fairy, Scary, Sherry, Gary, McClory, Huckleberry, and the legendary Doot, sometimes called Ledoot. The official card description says it all with wonderful character. Spawns an army of skeletons. Meet Larry and his friends Harry, Gary, Terry, Mary, etc. That casual, etc. acknowledges that 15 is a lot of names to remember, but each skeleton is an individual nonetheless. According to the October 1st, 2018 balance changes, Supercell officially revealed the complete list of names, cementing skeleton personalities in canon rather than leaving them to fan speculation alone. The Skeleton Army's visual deployment is satisfyingly chaotic. Unlike the ordered triangle of the 3 skeleton card, the army scatters across a wide area in seemingly random positions. This formation serves multiple purposes. It makes the army more resistant to single-area damage hits, as skeletons are spread too far for many spells to catch them all. It allows them to surround enemies from every direction simultaneously, creating a skeletal tide that engulfs rather than merely attacks. It looks appropriately overwhelming, a genuine army rather than a small squad. Each skeleton in the army is identical to those from the basic Skeletons card. having the same hit points, damage, speed, and appearance. They spawn with the same lack of lower jaw, the same purple eyes, the same short swords. What changes is quantity and formation. Where 3 skeletons provide precision, 15 provide overwhelming force. Where 3 can distract, 15 can destroy. The difference between a squad and an army is more than numerical. It's philosophical. The historical evolution of Skeleton Army parallels the broader skeleton story in Clash Royale. When the game launched on January 4th, 2016, Skeleton Army spawned 20 skeletons and cost 4 elixir. This massive horde could overwhelm nearly any ground troop, creating swarms so dense that enemies simply vanished beneath the clicking, slashing chaos. But the 4 elixir cost made it a significant investment, vulnerable to spell counters that could generate positive elixir traits for opponents. The April 4th, 2016 tournament update increased the count from 20 to 21 skeletons and compressed their spawning pattern when deployed near the river, fixing an issue where some would spawn in enemy territory before others. The description was also changed to add "Ledut," a reference to skeleton memes that had proliferated through the community. The October 20th, 2016 balance update made the most significant change, decreasing the cost to 3 elixir, but reducing the skeleton count to 15 and adjusting their levels to compensate. This transformation from a 4 elixir swarm of 21 to a 3 elixir swarm of 15 fundamentally altered how players use Skeleton Army. The card became more versatile, easier to include in various deck archetypes, quicker to cycle through. The reduced cost made spell counters less profitable for opponents, though cards like Zap or Log could still eliminate the entire army for a positive trade. The balance struck a middle ground where Skeleton Army remained powerful, but required more careful timing and placement. Over subsequent years, Skeleton Army received the same hit point and damage adjustments as other skeleton units, plus various quality of life improvements. The card's formation was tweaked multiple times to prevent exploitation. Eventually, with the October 26, 2022 update, its unlock arena was moved from Bone Pit to Peke's Playhouse, changing when new players could access this powerful card. Each adjustment reflected ongoing efforts to keep Skeleton Army relevant without making it oppressive. The strategic applications of Skeleton Army are distinct from the basic Skeletons card, despite using identical units. The army excels at shutting down single-target threats with overwhelming numbers. Against troops like P.E.K.K.A., Prince, Giant, Golem, or any building targeting unit, the 15 skeletons swarm and destroy before the target can eliminate them all. The damage per second from 15 tiny swords is substantial, capable of melting through even the most heavily armored foes given time. On defense, Skeleton Army serves as an emergency button against pushes that threaten to break through. When your opponent commits heavily to an attack, dropping Skeleton Army in their path can halt momentum completely. The skeletons surround, distract, and defeat, buying precious seconds for your towers and other defenses to respond. Even if spells counter the army, you forced opponents to spend resources, potentially leaving them vulnerable to counterattacks. The army also functions as bait in spell-bait strategies. If opponents hold Zap or Log specifically to counter your Skeleton Army, they can't use those spells on your Goblin Barrel, Goblin Gang, or other swarm threats. You create rock, paper, scissors scenarios where opponents must choose which threat to spell and which to accept. Sometimes, just having Skeleton Army in hand influences opponent behavior, making them play more conservatively or hold spells defensively rather than using them offensively. The vulnerability to spells represents Skeleton Army's greatest weakness. Zap, Log, Arrows, Bar Barrel, Snowball, and numerous other cards can completely eliminate the entire army for neutral or positive elixir traits. This makes timing crucial. Deploy Skeleton Army when opponents have already used their spell, when they're low on elixir, or when baiting will create opportunities elsewhere. Deploy it carelessly, and you've essentially donated 3 elixir to your opponent. Against area-damaged troops like Wizard, Witch, Valkyrie, or Bomber, Skeleton Army can still work if deployed directly on top of the enemy unit. The skeletons spawn surrounding the threat, attacking from all angles simultaneously. While the area damage will eliminate skeletons continuously, the combined damage from the entire army can defeat the threat before all skeletons die, especially with tower assistance. This requires precise placement, deploying right on top of the target rather than in front of it. The Skeleton Army has inspired countless memorable moments in competitive play. Professional players pulling off perfectly timed army deployments, converting defense into overwhelming counterattacks. Devastating spell predictions where players zap or log positions before opponents deploy the army, catching it the instant it appears. Failed predictions where the spell hits empty ground and the army tears through defenses unopposed. Each moment contributes to the card's legend, proof that 15 small skeletons can shift entire matches. In terms of lore, the Skeleton Army represents community. These aren't individual skeletons operating independently. They're a collective. Larry and his friends, fighting together, moving as one, sharing a purpose that transcends individual survival. When you deploy Skeleton Army, you're not calling forth 15 separate entities, but one entity composed of 15 parts. They work in harmony, their movements coordinated by some unseen force, possibly the dark magic that animated them initially. The named skeletons add personality to this collective. Larry, the famous one, presumably leads or at least represents the group. Harry might be brave, always at the front. Terry could be the troublemaker, attacking from unexpected angles. Mary breaks gender norms, proving skeleton warriors come in all flavors. Gary, who might become General Gary in evolved form, perhaps coordinates tactics. Barry, Cherry, Carrie, Fairy, Scary, Sherry, Gary, McClary, and Huckleberry each contribute their own essence to the army, individual notes in a symphony of bones. The Doot or Ledoot skeleton deserves special mention. This name emerged from internet skeleton memes, particularly the Thank Mr. Skeletal meme that spread across social media years ago. When Supercell officially acknowledged Ledoot in the card description update, they validated community culture, showing they appreciated the organic memes and inside jokes that had developed around their game. Ledoot represents the intersection of official lore and fan creation, a skeleton that exists simultaneously in Supercell's universe and in community imagination. Skeleton Army's visual design has evolved over the years. The card render has been updated multiple times, refining the skeletal appearance, adjusting the color palette, improving the level of detail visible. Yet the core image remains. A horde of skeletons, weapons raised, rushing forward as an unstoppable tide. The render captures motion and energy, conveying the sense that these bones are very much active despite their former owners being very much not. In October 2025, Skeleton Army received its evolution version, adding General Gary to the mix. This development expanded the lore significantly, showing that among the army exists hierarchy and leadership. General Gary appears as a guard variant with purple eyes, wearing a helmet with golden handle and team-colored. Crest a purple cape with gold lining, carrying a spear with attached purple banner, displaying a skull symbol and wielding a wooden shield bearing the card evolution symbol. The existence of General Gary raises fascinating questions. Was he always present among the army, simply unnamed and undistinguished until evolution? Or does evolution elevate one skeleton from the ranks to leadership position? In most depictions, Skeleton Army includes both Larry and Gary among its named members. If Gary evolves into General, does this make him superior to Larry? Or are they equals, with Gary handling tactical command while Larry retains his status as symbolic leader? These questions might seem silly, overthinking game mechanics that simply needed a cool evolution design. But they mattered to the skeleton lore community, to players who have invested years into caring about these rattling warriors. The relationships between named skeletons, the hierarchy and social structures implied by titles like General, the possibility that skeleton society exists beyond what we see in battle. All of this enriches the experience of deploying the card. Consider also the tragedy inherent in Skeleton Army. Every deployment, you summon 15 warriors who know they're likely to be obliterated by a spell, burned by a wizard, swept away by log. Yet they come anyway, rushing forward with eternal optimism or perhaps eternal resignation. They are soldiers who die repeatedly, rewinding through some cycle of resurrection that brings them back to deploy again and again and again. Do they remember their previous defeats? Do they carry the weight of countless battles in their hollow bones? Or does each deployment feel like the first time, fresh and new, unburdened by memory of past defeats? The community has embraced Skeleton Army through countless memes and creative works. Animations showing the army overwhelming powerful troops, only to be zapped away at the last second. Comic strips depicting Larry organizing his friends for another doomed charge. Fan fiction exploring the relationships between named skeletons, their camaraderie in the face of certain destruction. This engagement demonstrates how a simple card can become canvas for imagination, how 15 identical game pieces can transform into 15 distinct characters with stories worth telling. In professional tournaments, Skeleton Army usage statistics tell their own story. The card falls in and out of meta favor, depending on the popularity of spell cards and swarm threats. When log usage spikes, Skeleton Army deployment drops. When log fades, the army returns. This rhythm, this dance between card and counter, plays out over months and years, tracked by data analysts and felt by players at every level. The army persists because even when countered, properly used skeletons extract value, buy time, create opportunities. As sleep approaches and consciousness fades, picture the Skeleton Army in your mind. 15 warriors appearing simultaneously in scattered formation. Larry and Harry and Gary and Terry and Mary and Barry and Cherry and Carrie and Fairy and Scary and Sherry and Gary and McClary and Huckleberry and Doot. Each one a character, each one a story. They don't move in perfect unison like disciplined soldiers. They scramble, they rush, they surround and attack from every angle like the enthusiastic undead horde they are. Some will fall quickly, swept away by spells or area damage. Others will land crucial hits, their tiny swords delivering death by 1,000 cuts. A few might survive the entire engagement, standing victorious among the wreckage of defeated enemies, raising swords in skeletal triumph before disappearing back to whatever realm spawned them. Each deployment writes a small story, 15 characters in search of purpose, finding it in the chaos of arena combat. The Skeleton Army represents community at its finest. Not one hero but many, not individual glory, but collective achievement. When you play this card, you're deploying friendship, deploying cooperation, deploying the understanding that together we are stronger than apart. Larry couldn't stop a prince alone, but Larry plus 14 friends absolutely can. That's the magic of the army, the transformation of individual weakness into collective strength. And so they wait, these 15 skeletons ready to be summoned at a moment's notice. Ready to charge once more into battle, weapons raised, bones rattling with anticipation, or perhaps just wind passing through their rib cages. They are the Skeleton Army, fierce despite fragility, powerful through numbers, beloved by millions. Let them march through your dreams tonight, clicking their way to victory or glorious defeat, laughing that hollow laugh that sounds like wind through empty halls, living their best undead lives in service to the arena. The giant skeleton, when Larry grew up and found a bomb, while regular skeletons embody speed and numbers. One skeleton took a different evolutionary path. The giant skeleton, that hulking bomb-carrying behemoth, represents what happens when skeletons embrace size, strength, and explosive consequences. This epic card, unlocked from PEKK's Playhouse, which is Arena 4, costs 6 elixir and deploys a single massive skeleton that doesn't just fight. It transforms death itself into a weapon. The giant skeleton's appearance immediately sets it apart from its smaller brethren. This is no fragile warrior held together by wispy magic. This skeleton stands tall, its bones thick and sturdy, its frame imposing. It wears a tattered purple cape that flows behind it as it moves, adding an air of dark nobility. Most distinctively, it carries an enormous bomb on its back, a black sphere with a glowing red fuse that promises devastation. The bomb is almost as large as the giant skeleton itself, yet it carries this burden with apparent ease, suggesting supernatural strength befitting its undead nature. The giant skeleton's skull follows the familiar jawless design, but scaled up dramatically. Its purple eyes glow with the same ethereal energy as regular skeletons, but brighter, more intense, as if more magic was required to animate this larger frame. Unlike regular skeletons that wield tiny swords, the giant skeleton carries an absolutely massive bomb as its primary weapon, though it can also deliver devastating melee attacks with its bare, bony hands when enemies get close. The card's description is simple but evocative. The bigger the skeleton, the bigger the bomb. Carries a bomb that blows up when the giant skeleton dies. This mechanic defines the card's entire identity. The giant skeleton isn't primarily about the damage it deals while alive, though that damage is respectable. It's about what happens when it falls, the moment when death becomes offensive capability, when defeat transforms into delayed victory. When the giant skeleton dies, its bomb drops to the ground and begins a 3-second countdown, marked by increasingly frantic ticking and glowing. After 3 seconds, the bomb detonates in a massive explosion that deals tremendous area damage to all ground units and structures within its radius. The damage is enough to eliminate most troops instantly and deal significant damage to buildings, including towers. This death damage makes the giant skeleton uniquely threatening, forcing opponents to carefully manage not just the living skeleton, but its posthumous revenge. The historical evolution of giant skeleton reveals constant struggle with balance. Since Clash Royale's launch on January 4th, 2016, this card has received more adjustments than almost any other, as Supercell tried to find the sweet spot where it felt powerful without being oppressive. The original giant skeleton dealt 1100 death damage at tournament standard, enough to destroy most troops and deal devastating damage to towers. This made it both terrifying and frustrating, depending which side of the deployment you found yourself on. The May 3, 2016 balance update decreased death damage by 20%, from 1100 to 880, reducing its tower-threatening capability while maintaining its defensive strength. The October 20, 2016 update decreased death damage again, from 880 to 720, a further 18% reduction. Players adapted, using giant skeleton more defensively than offensively, leveraging the death bomb to clear enemy pushes rather than threatening towers directly. The November 1, 2016 update increased the bomb timer from 3 seconds to 4 seconds, giving opponents more time to escape the blast radius. This significantly weakened the card, as skilled players could now kite units away from the bomb or retreat their troops before detonation. The December 12, 2016 update then decreased the timer back to 3 seconds, acknowledging the 4-second timer had overcorrected. Balance changes continued over the years. February 2, 2018 decreased bomb damage by 8%. The March 5, 2018 update decreased hit points by 4%. July 2, 2018 increased bomb timer to 4 seconds again. August 6, 2018 decreased hit points by 6%. September 3, 2018 decreased hit points by 4% more and reduced bomb radius by 1 tile. Each change attempted to rein in a card that consistently overperformed at lower skill levels, while underperformed at the highest competitive levels. The pattern continued through 2019, 2020, and beyond. Hit speed adjustments, hit point tweaks, bomb damage modifications, radius changes, each trying to thread the needle between useful and oppressive. The June 7, 2021 update added a new visual effect where the bomb's timer appears above it, making the countdown more visible and giving players clearer information about when detonation would occur. The October 2024 balance update increased bomb damage significantly, from 742 to 850 at max level, swinging the pendulum back toward offensive viability. Most dramatically, the June 2023 rework completely reimagined how Giant Skeleton functioned. The bomb damage was increased essentially, radius was adjusted, and the entire role of the card shifted. Previously a defensive specialist, the rework pushed Giant Skeleton toward more hybrid use, equally viable on defense and in counter pushes. Community reaction was mixed, with players debating whether the changes preserved the card's identity or transformed it into something fundamentally different. Throughout all these changes, certain strategic truths remain constant. Giant Skeleton excels at stopping ground pushes, especially beatdown strategies that cluster troops behind a tank. When opponents commit heavily to an attack, Giant Skeleton can be dropped in the middle of their push, tanking damage while its bomb threat forces either retreat or acceptance of massive casualties. Even if opponents eliminate the Giant Skeleton quickly, the bomb still detonates, potentially wiping out the entire push and creating positive elixir trades. On offense, Giant Skeleton functions as a unique tank. It has substantial hit points, allowing it to absorb tower damage while support troops work behind it. But opponents must calculate whether to eliminate it near their tower, risking bomb damage, or to kite it away, potentially allowing more hits from support troops. This creates psychological pressure, forcing difficult decisions under time constraint. Even if the Giant Skeleton never reaches the tower, just walking toward it forces opponent reactions that create opportunities. The synergy between Giant Skeleton and clone strategies produce some of competitive Clash Royale's most explosive moments. Cloning a Giant Skeleton creates a second bomb threat, potentially doubling the area denial or tower damage. Opponents facing cloned Giant Skeletons often face impossible choices. Let both reach the tower and accept devastating bomb damage, or eliminate them quickly and still take significant bomb damage. The psychological impact of two bombs ticking down simultaneously cannot be overstated. Dark Prince became a classic companion for Giant Skeleton, as the Charging Prince could clear path for the slower skeleton while benefiting from the bomb-clearing defensive troops. Tornado paired excellently, pulling enemy troops into the bomb's blast radius and preventing their escape. Executioner and Bowler synergized by clearing swarms that might distract or quickly eliminate the Giant Skeleton before it reached valuable positions. Night Witch often accompanied Giant Skeleton, spawning bats that forced opponent responses while the skeleton lumbered forward. In terms of lore, the Giant Skeleton raises fascinating questions. Is this a skeleton that grew to enormous size through dark magic or accumulated death energy? Is it a different species of skeleton entirely, perhaps once belonging to a giant humanoid creature? Or is it, as some theories suggest, what happens when regular skeletons like Lari are exposed to too much magic, too much power, transforming from small warrior into massive bomber? The bomb itself carries mysterious origins. Where did this enormous explosive device come from? Did some mad alchemist create it? Did the Giant Skeleton craft it from materials scavenged across the arena? Or is the bomb itself magical, conjured from death energy and manifested as physical explosive? The game never explains, leaving these questions to fuel fan theories and imaginative speculation. The Giant Skeleton's personality, as much as can be inferred from animations and behavior, seems almost melancholic. It moves slowly, deliberately, without the manic energy of smaller skeletons. Its stance suggests weight, not just physical, but existential. This skeleton knows it will die. It knows its death will cause massive destruction. It accepts this fate with what appears to be resignation, carrying its bomb toward enemies like Atlas carrying the world, burdened but unyielding. Community creativity around Giant Skeleton has produced countless memorable works. Animations showing the skeleton approaching towers while defenders scramble desperately to stop it. Comics depicting the giant skeleton as a tragic figure, wanting friends but knowing its explosive death makes closeness dangerous. Memes about the satisfaction of perfectly timed bomb detonations versus the frustration of bombs that explode too late or in wrong positions. The card has personality despite or perhaps because of its simple, destructive purpose. In competitive play, Giant Skeleton has enjoyed periods of prominence and stretches of obscurity. During metas favoring beatdown strategies, Giant Skeleton emerges as counter, punishing players who cluster troops together. During spell-heavy metas where players hold splash damage specifically to counter swarms, Giant Skeleton struggles to find value. The card's viability ebbs and flows with the broader meta, but it never completely disappears, always lurking in some player's deck, ready to surprise opponents who forgot to respect the bomb. The Giant Skeleton's bomb has produced some of Clash Royale's most memorable tournament moments. Perfectly predicted bombs catching entire pushes, eliminating 6 or 7 elixir worth of troops in one explosion. Failed predictions, where the bomb explodes on empty ground while the troops it was meant to counter survive elsewhere. Desperate overtime situations, where a bomb detonating a tower delivers exactly enough damage for victory. Each moment becomes highlight, becomes story, becomes part of the card's growing legend. The visual spectacle of the bomb detonation deserves appreciation. The expanding circle of flame, the shockwave rippling outward, the sound design combining explosion with magical energy release. Everything about the detonation emphasizes impact, making each explosion feel significant even after you've seen it thousands of times. It's a death worthy of the skeleton carrying the bomb, spectacular and devastating in equal measure. As you drift into sleep, imagine the Giant Skeleton's slow march. Each step deliberate, bones creaking under the weight of the bomb, purple cape flowing behind like banner or shroud. It knows enemies await. It knows its journey ends in explosion. Yet it walks on, faithful to its purpose, accepting its role as both weapon and sacrifice. The bomb ticks down after death. 3 seconds of anticipation. 3 seconds of scrambling or acceptance. 3 seconds before the world erupts in flames that consume everything within reach. The Giant Skeleton is tragedy made tactical, death made deliberate, sacrifice made strategic. It is the skeleton that grew up, that took on greater burden in exchange for greater impact. Where Larry and his friends dance through battle with manic energy, the Giant Skeleton walks with grim determination. Where regular skeletons hope to survive and contribute, the Giant Skeleton knows its greatest contribution comes after life ends. It is the undead made more undead, animated for the express purpose of becoming unanimated again. Existence defined by the moment of cessation. And yet there's something admirable in that certainty, that acceptance of purpose. The Giant Skeleton doesn't question its role or resist its fate. It simply carries its bomb forward, step by step, closer to whatever awaits, ready to transform its death into devastating art. That's a kind of courage, isn't it? Knowing the ending yet marching toward it anyway, making peace with explosive destiny, finding meaning in destruction. Let the Giant Skeleton guard your dreams tonight. That massive frame a wall between you and anything that might disturb rest. Trust in the bomb to eliminate threats, to clear away chaos, to create space for peace. The skeleton that grew up can protect you now, carrying its burden so you don't have to carry yours. Sleep soundly, knowing that somewhere in the arena, A giant skeleton is walking its eternal walk, counting down to an explosion that will echo through tomorrow. The witch, mother of skeletons and necromantic architect behind every army of skeletons, stands a summoner, a wielder of dark magic who calls bones from the earth and animates them with purpose. The witch, that purple-robed necromancer with her staff of power and army of undead servants, represents the source from which skeletons flow. This epic card, unlocked from PEKK's Playhouse, which is Arena 4, costs 5 elixir and deploys a ranged splash damage dealer who continuously spawns skeletons throughout her lifetime. The witch's visual design immediately communicates her dark nature. She wears flowing purple robes adorned with skull motifs, marking her as a practitioner of death magic. Her staff, topped with a glowing skull, serves as both weapon and necromantic focus. Her face is obscured by her hood, adding mystery and suggesting someone who has looked into death's realm long enough to be changed by it. Purple energy swirls around her, the same purple that glows in skeleton eyes, connecting her visually to her undead creations. Every few seconds, the witch spawns skeletons behind her. These skeletons are identical to those from the Skeleton's card and Skeleton Army, having the same stats, speed, and behavior. They spawn in groups of 3, appearing in that familiar triangle formation. Over her lifetime, if left unchallenged, a single witch can spawn dozens of skeletons, creating a perpetual stream of undead warriors that overwhelm through attrition. She is factory and commander, creator and controller, the necromantic heart of skeleton society. The witch's attack consists of lobbing skulls from her staff in a splash damage arc. These projectiles travel through the air before impacting and dealing area damage to ground and air units. The splash radius allows her to clear swarms effectively, making her strong against other skeleton-based strategies, goblin gangs, and clustered troops. The damage is moderate, not devastating but respectable, enough to wear down targets over time while her skeletons do the primary offensive work. Since Clash Royale's launch on January 4th, 2016, the witch has undergone numerous balance changes, reflecting ongoing struggle to make her competitively viable without being oppressive. Early versions spawned skeletons more frequently and had different damage profiles. Over time, Supercell adjusted her skeleton spawn rate, hit points, damage, hit speed, spawn speed, and various other statistics, searching for the balance point where she felt powerful without dominating matches. The January 13th, 2016 update increased witch hit points by 5%. The February 2nd, 2016 update increased her damage by 5% and decreased her skeleton spawn time from 8 seconds to 7 seconds, making her spawn skeletons more quickly. The May 3rd, 2016 update decreased her range from 6 tiles to 5.5 tiles. The November 1st, 2016 update increased her first skeleton spawn time from 1 second to 2 seconds, preventing instant skeleton swarms upon deployment. More significant changes came in later years. The June 1st, 2018 rework completely reimagined the witch, increasing her first skeleton spawn time to 5 seconds, increasing her skeleton spawn speed to 7 seconds, but also allowing her to spawn 4 skeletons instead of 3. Her damage was increased, but her hit speed was decreased, fundamentally changing how she functioned in battle. These changes made her more powerful but less oppressive, requiring more skill to use effectively. The October 7th, 2019 update reverted many of these changes, decreasing her skeleton spawn count back to 3, decreasing her damage, but increasing her hit speed and decreasing her skeleton spawn time. She was rebuilt again, differently from both her original incarnation and the 2018 rework. The community adapted once more, learning the new witch's rhythm, discovering her optimal placements and synergies. In 2021, the witch received her evolution, adding a new dimension to her character. When evolved, the witch becomes the Super Witch, her robes darker, her power greater, spawning big skeletons instead of regular skeletons. These big skeletons are larger, stronger, and more durable than regular skeletons, transforming the witch from moderate threat to genuine win condition. The evolution emphasized her identity as skeleton matriarch, the ultimate expression of necromantic power. Strategically, the witch functions primarily as a support card, rather than a tank or primary win condition. Her value comes from continuous skeleton generation, creating perpetual pressure that opponents must address. Place her behind a tank like Giant, Golem, or Lava Hound, and she spawns skeletons that protect the tank while dealing damage. She converts defense into offense, transforming a simple defensive witch into a counter-push threat that can spiral out of control if ignored. On defense, the witch excels against swarms and ground-targeting troops. Her splash damage clears skeleton armies, goblin gangs, and bats quickly. Her spawn skeletons distract single-target threats like Prince, P.E.K.K.A., or Mini P.E.K.K.A., buying time for towers to deal damage while preventing charge abilities. A well-placed witch can stop ground pushes single-handedly, then transition into offense with her surviving health and accumulated skeleton bodyguards. Rocket kills her instantly, though at neutral elixir trade. Lightning hits her and nearby troops simultaneously, making it efficient if opponents can catch her with support units. Mini P.E.K.K.A., Prince, and other high-damage troops can reach and eliminate her before her skeletons overwhelm them if they read properly supported or have clear paths. The relationship between Witch and her skeletons has inspired significant lore speculation. Is she their creator, literally animating bones with dark magic? Is she their commander, calling forth skeletons that already exist in some netherworld? Is she their mother, as her title Mother Witch in some contexts suggests, giving birth to undead children through necromantic means? The game never clarifies, leaving these questions open for interpretation. Consider the implications if the witch truly creates skeletons. Every Larry, every Harry, every member of the skeleton army might ultimately trace their existence back to a witch's spell. In this interpretation, the witch is skeleton genesis, the source from which all other skeleton cards derive. Regular skeletons are simply those that persist after their witch falls, continuing to serve their purpose even after their creator's demise. Alternatively, if the witch merely summons existing skeletons from elsewhere, she becomes a portal or conduit. Somewhere in the Clash universe exists a skeleton realm, a boneyard or underworld where countless undead warriors await. The witch's magic creates temporary bridges between that realm and the arena, allowing skeletons to cross over, fight, and return. In this interpretation, Larry and his friends have independent existence, and the witch is simply the means by which they enter battle. The Mother Witch title, introduced with a separate card later in Clash Royale's history, adds another layer. This variant transforms enemy troops into pigs, rather than spawning skeletons, but her title suggests a maternal relationship with something. If there's a Mother Witch, does that make the regular witch their sister, daughter, or simply lesser variant? Does the title indicate biological or metaphorical motherhood? Can the undead even have family structures in the traditional sense? Community content often portrays the witch as caring for her skeletons, treating them as her children or loyal servants. Animations show her mourning when they fall, celebrating their victories, scolding them for misbehavior. Comic strips depict domestic scenes where the witch prepares meals skeletons can't eat or tucks them into beds they do in need. These humanizing portrayals transform her from mere game piece into character with emotional depth and relationships worth exploring. In battle, the witch's skeleton spawning creates interesting rhythms. She spawns. Enemies clear the skeletons. She spawns again. A cycle that continues until she falls or reaches her target. This rhythm means pressure is constant but predictable. Skilled opponents time their spells to clear skeletons immediately after they spawn, maximizing efficiency. Skilled witch players time their deployments to align skeleton spawns with pushes, maximizing their impact. The sound design around Witch emphasizes her necromantic nature. Her attack carries ethereal, ghostly tones. Her skeleton spawning comes with distinctive audio cues, alerting attentive players even if they're not watching that specific position. Her death sound suggests magic dissipating, the spell that held everything together finally breaking. Even her presence on the field has ambient audio, subtle whispers that reinforce her dark magic theme. The Witch has been featured in various game modes beyond standard battles. In certain draft challenges, she becomes high-value pick, offering splash damage, swarm generation, and versatility. In triple elixir mode, her skeleton spawning becomes overwhelming, creating floods of undead that opponents struggle to contain. In special challenges where certain cards are buffed, powered-up witches become nearly unstoppable, spawning skeletons so quickly that the screen fills with rattling bones. Competitive usage of Witch has varied across Clash Royale's history. She's been meta-defining during certain periods, appearing in top ladder decks and championship tournaments. She's been completely absent during others, considered too vulnerable or slow for the pacing of competitive play. She's the definition of meta-dependent, strong when the cards that counter her are weak, weak when those counters dominate. This volatility makes her interesting, never quite settling into permanent position in the tier lists. The Witch also represents player progression for newer players. Unlocked relatively early from Arena 4, she provides accessible splash damage and swarm generation that helps players understand key strategic concepts. Learning when to deploy the Witch, how to support her, when to sacrifice her for value, these lessons translate to understanding the game at deeper levels. Many players remember their first Witch, the excitement of unlocking that epic card and trying it in battle for the first time. As sleep deepens and dreams begin, imagine the Witch standing at the boundary between life and death. Her staff glows with purple energy, that light that connects all skeletons to their source. She raises the staff, speaks words and languages long forgotten, and bones rise from the earth. 3 skeletons, then 3 more, then 3 more again, an endless procession of undead warriors answering her call. She is mother, creator, commander, architect of skeletal armies. Where other troops fight alone or in fixed groups, she builds her army dynamically, adapting to the flow of battle. Her magic is patient, inexorable, the kind of power that doesn't overwhelm immediately, but accumulates over time until suddenly the battlefield is covered in rattling bones and gleaming purple eyes, and her enemies realize, too late, that they should have addressed her sooner. The Witch represents transformation of death into purpose. Bones that should rest in peace instead rise to serve. Endings become beginnings. What was lost becomes found, though changed, though different, though animated by forces that transcend natural life. She is the proof that in Clash Royale's universe, death is not final but transitional, not an ending but a different kind of existence. Let her magic protect your sleep tonight. Let her skeleton stand guard while you rest. She who commands death itself can surely ensure your dreams remain peaceful, your rest undisturbed. The Witch watches, staff in hand, ready to summon defenders should nightmares approach. Behind her, an infinite army of bones awaits her command, loyal until the final tower falls, faithful beyond death itself. The mother of skeletons nurtures her children through battle after battle. She calls them forth, watches them fight, welcomes them back when they fall. This is her purpose, her power, her eternal role in the arena. And as long as witches exist, skeletons will never truly be gone. They are always just a spell away from rattling back into existence, ready for one more battle, one more charge, one more moment in the moonlight, before returning to whatever realm spawned them. Night Witch, sister of darkness and bat matriarch, while the witch rules over skeleton armies, her darker counterpart holds dominion over a different form of death servants. The Night Witch, released on May 12, 2017, as part of a major update, brought with her not skeletons but bats, Those small flying creatures that swarm through the night sky with chittering malevolence. This legendary card, unlocked from Hog Mountain, which is Arena 10, costs 4 elixir and represents the Witch's Shadow, the necromancer who chose a different path towards similar ends. The Night Witch's appearance immediately distinguishes her from her skeletal sibling. Where the witch wears purple, the Night Witch wears black with purple accents. Her robes are darker, more tattered, suggesting someone who has delved deeper into Forbidden's magic. Her staff is twisted and gnarled, topped not with a skull, but with a purple crystal that pulses with malevolent energy. Her face is pale, her expression severe, her entire design suggesting someone who has sacrificed more for power than the witch ever did. Most distinctively, the Night Witch's familiar spirits are not skeletons, but bats. She continuously spawns bats throughout her lifetime, 4 at a time rather than 3 skeletons, creating airborne swarms that attack both ground and air units. These bats are fragile, even more so than skeletons, dying to any damage whatsoever. But they fly, giving them mobility and targeting flexibility that ground-bound skeletons lack. They swarm around enemies, overwhelming through numbers and speed, death delivered on leathery wings. The Night Witch's attack differs fundamentally from the witch's splash projectiles. Instead, she shoots dark energy bolts that deal high single-target damage to ground units. This makes her excellent at eliminating high hit point threats rather than clearing swarms. Combined with her bat spawning, she represents a different strategic niche. Tank killer rather than swarm counter, assassin rather than area denier, precision rather than spread. Upon death, the Night Witch spawns 4 bats immediately, a death spawn similar to but distinct from the giant skeleton spawn. These final bats represent her last act of necromancy, a posthumous contribution that can catch opponents off guard. The death spawn ensures that defeating the Night Witch doesn't completely end her threat, as those 4 bats might reach towers or eliminate weakened troops, extracting final value from your elixir investment. The Night Witch's introduction to Clash Royale was explosive, arguably one of the most impactful card releases in the game's history. When she first arrived, she was overwhelmingly powerful, dominating the meta so completely that nearly every competitive deck included her. Her bat spawn rate was too fast, her damage too high, her death spawn too threatening. She defined the meta for weeks, warping deck building and strategy around either using her or countering her. The June 12, 2017 balance update, mere weeks after her release, significantly nerfed the Night Witch. Her bat spawn time was increased from 6 seconds to 7 seconds. Her hit points were decreased by 9%. Her damage was decreased by 9%. Her death spawn bats were reduced from 4 to 3. These changes were dramatic, reflecting how overpowered she had been. But even after them, she remained viable and popular. Subsequent updates continued refining the Night Witch. The October 9, 2017 update increased her bat spawn speed from 7 seconds back to 6 seconds, but decreased her range from 5.5 tiles to 5 tiles. The March 5, 2018 update decreased her hit points by 5%. The May 31, 2018 update decreased her bat spawn speed from 6 seconds to 5 seconds, but decreased her damage by 17%. Each change tried to find the sweet spot between powerful and oppressive. The pattern continued over years. Her hit speed was adjusted, affecting how quickly she could eliminate targets. Her sight range was modified, changing her ability to lock onto troops. Her initial bat spawn time was increased, preventing instant bat swarms upon deployment. Her death spawn was adjusted multiple times, settling at 4 bats again in later updates. Through it all, the Night Witch remained relevant, never quite as dominant as her release, but never falling into complete obscurity. Strategically, the Night Witch functions as a versatile support card that excels behind tanks. Place her behind a golem, and she spawns bat after bat, creating aerial swarms that opponents must address while the golem absorbs damage. Use her with giant, and her high single target damage eliminates troops trying to counter your tank, while bats provide additional pressure. Pair her with lava hound, and you create overwhelming air pressure that opponents struggle to counter with typical anti-air defensive cards. On defense, the Night Witch shines against high hit point ground units. Her high single target damage lets her melt through tanks like Giant Royal Giant or Golem. Her bats distract and delay, buying precious seconds for towers to deal damage. Against aerial threats, her bats can surround and eliminate, though they're vulnerable to splash damage from support troops. She's versatile enough to handle various threats, making her valuable in many situations. The relationship between Night Witch and bats mirrors the witch's relationship with skeletons, but with subtle differences. Bats are not undead in the same sense that skeletons are. They're creatures transformed or controlled through dark magic, living things corrupted rather than dead things animated. This distinction matters lore-wise, suggesting that the Night Witch's magic operates through domination and corruption rather than pure necromancy. Some community theories suggest the Night Witch and Witch are siblings, sisters who chose different paths in their magical studies. The Witch mastered animating the dead. The Night Witch mastered controlling the living. Both pursue power through dark arts, but their methods and philosophies diverge. The Night Witch is specialist, optimized for specific conditions, while the Witch is generalist, functional in all circumstances. Visual design reinforces this nocturnal theme. The Night Witch's color palette is blacks and purples, colors of midnight and shadow. Her animations are smoother, more graceful, suggesting someone who moves through darkness like water through cracks. Her bat spawning looks effortless, as if the bats emerge naturally from her presence, rather than being deliberately summoned. She doesn't command death, she embodies it, becoming living shadow that spawns smaller shadows to do her bidding. The bats themselves deserve attention. These tiny creatures, with their leathery wings and chittering cries, are even more fragile than skeletons. Any damage kills them instantly, making them vulnerable to splash, spells, and area damage troops. Yet they fly, giving them tactical advantages skeletons lack. They can cross rivers without bridges, bypass ground defenses entirely, target air units, and reach towers more directly. Their fragility is offset by mobility and spawn rate, creating constant pressure through renewed waves. In competitive play, Night Witch has been part of numerous meta decks. The Golem Night Witch beatdown archetype dominated for months, overwhelming opponents through relentless pressure. Bridge spam decks utilized her for quick pressure and tower damage. She appeared in various hybrid decks that leveraged her versatility. Professional players pioneered techniques for maximizing her value, like timing bat spawns to tank tower shots for more valuable units or using her to kite building targeting troops while bats dealt damage. The Night Witch's legendary rarity makes her harder to obtain and upgrade than the common witch, creating accessibility barriers for free-to-play players. This rarity feels appropriate given her power level and versatility, but it means many players experience her primarily as opponent rather than tool. Facing fully upgraded Night Witches when your own is underleveled creates frustration, as the card's strength scales significantly with levels, affecting bat spawn rate and survivability. Special game modes featuring Night Witch reveal different facets of her power. In Triple Elixir, she spawns bats so quickly that the air fills with leathery wings. In draft challenges, she becomes premium pick, offering versatility and win condition potential simultaneously. In challenges where certain rarities are banned, her absence is felt immediately, highlighting how much her presence shapes strategies and deck building. The Night Witch has become so integral to certain playstyles that her removal fundamentally changes how those decks function. Animations depict her as more sinister than the Witch, more willing to embrace morally questionable magic. Fan art frequently shows her in dramatically shadowed settings, surrounded by swirling bats and dark energy. Comics contrast her seriousness with the witch's occasional whimsy, suggesting personality differences alongside their magical specializations. The Night Witch is the one who didn't hesitate, who dove into forbidden knowledge without reservation, who paid whatever price power demanded. The bats she commands reflect this darker commitment. While skeletons retain some cartoonish charm, despite being undead, bats feel more genuinely threatening. Their chittering, their swarming, their association with vampires and caves in darkness all contribute to making them feel dangerous rather than merely deadly. When Night Witch spawns bats, it feels like releasing something that should remain contained, letting loose creatures that belong in nightmares rather than battlefields. Yet beneath the dark aesthetic, Night Witch serves similar strategic purpose to her skeletal counterpart. Both are support cards that spawn secondary units continuously. Both convert defense into offense effectively. Both require opponents to balance addressing the spawner versus the spawn units. Both reward players who protect them, allowing their spawn mechanics to generate overwhelming value over time. They are variations on a theme, different implementations of the same core concept. The perpetual spawner who creates value through persistence. The Night Witch's presence in clan wars, special events, and seasonal content has been significant. She appears in special challenges, serves as draft pick in clan war duels, features in limited time modes with unique rules. Each appearance reminds players of her versatility and power, why she achieved legendary status, why she remains relevant years after her initially overpowered release. She has staying power that many cards lack, constantly finding new relevance as metas shift and strategies evolve. As sleep deepens and consciousness fades further into dreams, picture the Night Witch in your mind. She stands in shadow, staff planted firmly in ground, purple energy pulsing through the twisted wood. Around her, bats circle endlessly, their wings creating soft whooshing sounds that blend into a susurrus of dark promise. She is patience and inevitability, the slow accumulation of threats that eventually becomes unstoppable. She doesn't charge forward like skeleton warriors. She walks deliberately, spawning bats with each step, creating aerial clouds that grow denser with each passing second. By the time she reaches enemy positions, she's accompanied by dozens of bats, a living storm of wings and teeth that descends upon defenders like biblical plague. This is her power. Not immediate impact, but inevitable buildup. Not explosive force, but gradual overwhelming. The Night Witch represents the darker path, the choice to embrace shadow fully rather than balance between light and dark. Where the witch summons bones that once lived, the Night Witch corrupts life itself, bending living creatures to her will. Where the witch builds armies of the past, the Night Witch commands swarms of the present. Both serve death, but through different philosophies, different methods, different relationships with the fundamental forces they channel. Let her watch over your sleep tonight, this sister of shadows. Let her bats circle your dreams, keeping nightmares at bay through their very presence. She who commands creatures of darkness can surely ensure darkness remains at proper distance, threatening only your enemies, protecting you through night's longest hours. The Night Witch stands vigil, patient and powerful, ready to release her swarms should anything disturb your rest. In the morning, you'll wake without remembering her presence, without knowing that through the night, bats circled overhead and dark magic held watch. That's how the Night Witch prefers it, working from shadows, letting others claim glory while she accomplishes what needs accomplishing. She's the dark to the witch's light, the shadow to her sister's substance, the necessary balance that allows both to exist. Evolved skeletons, purple hats, and never-ending resurrection. On October 24th, 2022, Clash Royale introduced a new mechanic that would fundamentally change how certain cards functioned. Card evolution arrived, allowing specific cards to reach new heights of power when upgraded beyond maximum level. The skeletons were among the first cards to receive this transformation. and their evolution introduced mechanics that turned a simple 3-skeleton card into a perpetual nuisance that refused to stay dead. Evolved skeletons maintain the same basic stats as their non-evolved counterparts in terms of hit points and damage. The 3 skeletons that spawn still die to any damage, still wield tiny swords, still scramble forward with that characteristic skeletal energy. But there's one crucial, game-changing difference. When an evolved skeleton dies, it respawns as another evolved skeleton after 4 seconds. This creates a cycle of resurrection that continues until time expires or something breaks the cycle through overwhelming force. The visual indicator of evolution is subtle but distinctive. Evolved skeletons wear purple hats, small caps that mark them as different from regular bone warriors. These hats don't provide defense or change behavior. They're purely cosmetic markers that let players instantly identify which skeletons will resurrect. The purple color matches the skeleton's glowing eyes, creating visual consistency that ties the evolution theme together. It's a whimsical touch, suggesting that achieving evolution grants skeletons not just power but style. The evolution mechanic transforms how players use and opponents counter the skeleton's card. Regular skeletons, once eliminated, are gone until you cycle back to the card and deploy it again. Evolved skeletons return automatically, creating pressure that persists far longer than the 3 elixir investment suggests. They become defensive permanents, constantly respawning to distract and damage threats. They become offensive persistence, continuously attacking towers unless completely stopped. To evolve cards, players must reach King level 14, the maximum King level. They need the card at maximum level, requiring significant time and resources for common cards like skeletons. Then they need evolution shards, special items that accumulate slowly through various game modes and occasionally through shop purchases. Finally, they need gold, the universal currency that gates all upgrades. The combined requirements make evolution accessible primarily to dedicated players or those willing to spend money, creating power disparities that sparked community debate. When first introduced, evolved skeletons immediately impacted the competitive meta. Their persistent respawning made them exceptionally valuable on defense, as they continuously distracted and damaged troops without requiring additional elixir investment. On offense, they provided constant chip damage, requiring opponents to address them repeatedly or accept slow tower deterioration. The 4-second respawn timer proved short enough that properly protected, evolved skeletons could chain resurrections indefinitely. Balance adjustments followed quickly. The November 7, 2022 update increased the respawn time from 4 seconds to 6 seconds, giving opponents more breathing room between skeleton waves. This change reduced their oppressive feel without eliminating their core strength. The evolution remained powerful, but required more careful protection and strategic placement. Further minor adjustments tweaked their power level over subsequent months. Strategically, evolved skeletons function differently from their regular counterparts. With regular skeletons, you accept that they're temporary, disposable tools that provide value then disappear. With evolved skeletons, you invest in permanence, creating threats that require sustained attention or hard counters. They're less about immediate impact and more about maintaining pressure, about creating problems opponents must repeatedly address. On defense, evolved skeletons shine against predictable attacks. Drop them to counter a hog rider, and they'll respawn to counter the next hog rider. Use them against a royal giant, and they'll return to distract the next royal giant push. Their resurrection turns single defensive plays into lasting solutions, extracting enormous value from what appears to be a minimal elixir investment. However, this strength depends on protecting them, ensuring they die in your territory where they can respawn safely. Offensively, evolved skeletons function as perpetual chip damage. Deploy them at the bridge and, even if they're immediately countered, they'll respawn and attack again. This forces opponents into difficult choices. Ignore them and accept continuous tower damage, or repeatedly spend resources countering them, potentially falling behind in elixir. Smart players cycle evolved skeletons constantly, creating multiple respawn chains that overwhelm through accumulated pressure. The counterplay to evolved skeletons involves breaking their respawn cycle. Area damaged troops like Valkyrie, Wizard, or Bomber can clear them repeatedly. Spells like Zap or Log can reset the cycle timing. Building placements can distract them away from valuable targets. Most effectively, eliminating them in enemy territory prevents respawn entirely, as they only resurrect if they die on your side of the arena. This creates interesting positional dynamics where the location of skeleton deaths matters enormously. The lore implications of evolution, particularly for skeletons, are fascinating. What does it mean for the dead to refuse to stay dead? Regular skeletons are already undead, animated beyond their natural end. Evolved skeletons are undead that resurrect repeatedly, creating cycles of death and rebirth that suggest something beyond simple necromancy. Are they trapped in a curse that prevents final rest? Have they achieved some form of skeletal enlightenment that grants them pseudo-immortality? Or is evolution simply concentrated dark magic, so powerful that it overcomes even death's grip on death itself? The purple hats add personality to this existential question. Someone gave these skeletons hats. Was it the witch marking her most powerful servants? Was it Larry distributing hats to his closest friends as symbol of their special status? Or did the skeletons claim the hats themselves, fashioning them from materials scavenged across battlefields, wearing them with skeletal pride? The game doesn't answer, leaving this small detail to fuel imagination and fan theories. Community response to evolved skeletons mixed excitement with concern. Players appreciated the new strategic depth evolution added, the fresh ways of using familiar cards, but the power level sparked debate. Were evolved skeletons too strong, warping the meta around them? Did their respawn mechanic feel unfair, creating situations where opponents felt helpless? Or was the community simply adjusting to new mechanics, learning counterplay that would eventually bring evolved cards into balance? Professional players quickly integrated evolved skeletons into competitive decks. Cycle decks leveraged their persistence to maintain constant pressure. Defensive decks used them as foundations for stopping pushes. Hybrid strategies combined both approaches, defending with evolved skeletons, then converting their respawns into counterattacks. Tournament matches showcased clever evolution timing, with players cycling to evolved cards precisely when opponents lacked answers. The evolution mechanic's greatest impact might be psychological. Players holding evolved skeletons know they have persistent threat that opponents must respect. Players facing evolved skeletons know they must carefully manage that threat or watch it spiral out of control. This mental component, the weight of knowledge that these skeletons won't simply die and disappear, changes how both players approach the entire match. It's pressure that exists even when the card isn't deployed, simply because it could be. In terms of sound and visual design, evolved skeletons receive special attention. Their respawn animation is distinctive, purple energy swirling as bones reassemble from ethereal components. The sound of resurrection carries magical tones, clearly different from initial deployment. These design choices ensure players immediately recognize when skeletons are respawning versus being freshly deployed, maintaining clarity even during chaotic battles. The community has created extensive content around evolved skeletons. Guides explaining optimal usage, when to protect respawns versus when to let skeletons die in enemy territory. Montages showing endless chains of resurrection. Skeletons dying and respawning dozens of times in single matches. Memes about opponents' frustration facing infinite skeleton loops. Discussions debating whether the evolution mechanic is healthy for the game or problematic power creep. Consider also the philosophical dimension of never-ending skeletons. In stories, undead that cannot be permanently killed are typically horrors, curses, problems to be solved rather than powers to be celebrated. But in Clash Royale, this eternal return becomes tactical advantage, strategic tool, blessing rather than curse. It's a fascinating inversion of traditional undead narratives, where resurrection is desirable rather than tragic, where refusing to stay dead is victory rather than damnation. As you descend deeper into sleep, imagine evolved skeletons in their endless cycle. 3 warriors fall in battle, bones scattering across arena floor. Purple energy swirls, and they rise again. Hats slightly askew, but spirits undimmed. They charge once more, knowing death is temporary, that they'll return again and again until victory is achieved or time expires. They are persistence incarnate, the refusal to accept defeat, the embodiment of try again, taken to supernatural extremes. Let them guard your dreams with their immortal vigilance. When nightmares approach, the skeletons fall defending you. 4 seconds pass, and they rise again, ready to face the same threats once more. They cannot be permanently defeated because they cannot permanently die. They are evolution's gift to those who need protection that never wavers, defense that never rests. Warriors who literally cannot quit because quitting would require staying dead, and they've evolved beyond death's ability to hold them. The purple hats bob in rhythm with their movements, marking them as special, as chosen, as evolved beyond their common origins. Larry and his friends reach new heights, not through size or strength, but through transcending death itself. They are skeletons squared, undead made more undead, the already impossible made more impossible still. And they march through your dreams wearing those ridiculous purple hats with absolute dignity, because style matters even when your bones held together by dark magic and stubborn refusal to rest. Evolution made skeletons immortal in the most literal sense possible. They don't just survive, they return. They don't just persist, they resurrect. They are the answer to the question, what if skeletons simply refuse to accept defeat? And that answer is terrifying for opponents, comforting for allies, and absolutely fascinating for anyone who appreciates the philosophical implications of animated bones that won't stay unanimated. Sleep soundly, knowing that somewhere in the arena, evolved skeletons are dying and respawning, maintaining eternal watch, ensuring that no threat goes unchallenged, that no tower stands undefended, that no battle is truly over until time expires. They are the warriors who learn that death is optional, that endings are merely transitions, that with enough determination and a sharp purple hat, even the smallest skeleton can become eternal. The Skeleton King, from Larry to royalty on October 26, 2021. Clash Royale introduced champions, a new rarity of cards that could only be unlocked from King level 14, and brought unique abilities that no other troops possessed. Among the first 3 champions released was the Skeleton King, and the community immediately recognized him as potentially connected to skeleton lore as most beloved character, Larry himself. The Skeleton King stands as the largest, most imposing skeleton in the game. He towers over regular skeletons, dwarfing even the giant skeleton in presence and authority. His appearance immediately communicates royalty. He wears an ornate crown, golden and glittering, sitting atop his skull with undeniable majesty. He carries a massive club, larger than several regular skeletons combined, capable of delivering devastating area damage with each swing. His bones appear thicker, sturdier, suggesting supernatural durability befitting a monarch. His purple cape flows behind him as he moves, the same purple that marks all skeleton units, connecting him to his subjects through shared coloration. His eyes glow with intense purple light, brighter than any regular skeleton, as if concentrated power or authority manifests through more brilliant luminescence. Everything about his design screams importance, power, leadership. This is not merely a skeleton. This is the skeleton, the king of all bones, the ruler of the undead realm. The Skeleton King's most distinctive feature is his ability, Soul Gathering. When activated, all troops within range that die contribute their souls to the Skeleton King, granting him increased damage. Additionally, he can resurrect fallen troops as skeletons that fight for him, bringing back even enemy units as undead servants. This ability, thematically perfect, connects him to skeleton lore, positioning him as the ultimate necromancer, the being who commands death itself rather than being merely subject to it. The resurrection mechanic feels like evolution of the witch's skeleton spawning, where she continuously creates skeletons from nothing. The Skeleton King transforms death itself into skeleton warriors. Fallen allies, defeated enemies, even other skeletons once they die, can all be resurrected by the King's power. He is recycler of death, ensuring nothing truly ends while he reigns, converting every casualty into another undead servant. The theory that Larry became the Skeleton King draws primarily from the animated short, Lost and Crowned. In this film, Larry steals the Red King's crown, triggering a series of misadventures that see the crown damaged and Larry punished. The Skeleton King's crown bears visual similarity to the crown from the animation, suggesting narrative connection. If Larry kept the crown after his punishment, if he discovered it held transformative power if wearing it long enough changed him fundamentally, then perhaps the small skeleton who couldn't resist touching things eventually became the king who rules all skeletons. The timeline supports this theory if we assume the animated shorts exist in a chronological sequence relative to card releases. Lost and Crowned could be Larry's origin story, explaining how he obtained the crown that would eventually transform him. His punishment, reduced to washing dishes, might have been temporary. Perhaps he continued wearing the crown in secret, its magic working slowly, gradually enlarging his bones, amplifying his power until he emerged transformed as the Skeleton King. Alternatively, the transformation might have been subtle. Perhaps the crown's damage during the adventure released concentrated magic, blessing or cursing Larry with immediate transformation. Maybe the dragon's involvement, the fire spirit's explosions, or the Red King's own magic residue all combined to create circumstances under which a simple skeleton could become royalty. The exact mechanism isn't important to the theory. What matters is the possibility, the narrative satisfaction of Larry's journey from lowly skeleton to ultimate skeleton authority. The Skeleton King's personality, as evidenced through his animations and emotes, shares characteristics with Larry from the shorts. There's a playfulness beneath the regal exterior, a sense that he doesn't take himself entirely seriously despite his imposing presence. His victory animations have whimsy that suggests someone enjoying their power rather than solemnly bearing responsibility. This lighter touch feels consistent with Larry's character, the curious skeleton who touched things he shouldn't, who stole crowns on impulse, who approached the world with childlike wonder despite being undead. Supercell has never officially confirmed or denied the Larry to Skeleton King theory. This ambiguity is likely intentional, allowing fans to believe what resonates with them while maintaining flexibility for future lore developments. The company seems to appreciate that sometimes fan theories enhance engagement more than official declarations would. By leaving the connection implied rather than explicit, they invite community participation in skeleton lore, making players co-creators rather than merely consumers. Competitively, the Skeleton King has been impactful since his release. His high hit points make him difficult to eliminate quickly. His area damage allows him to clear swarms and pressure multiple targets simultaneously. His ability provides value in both offense and defense, resurrecting fallen troops during enemy pushes, or creating overwhelming attacks by converting your own casualties into skeleton reinforcements. He functions as tank, damage dealer, and support simultaneously, justifying his champion status. The 80 elixir cost makes him expensive, requiring careful elixir management and strategic timing. You can't simply drop the Skeleton King reactively like you might with cheaper troops. He represents significant investment that must be protected and leveraged properly. But when used effectively, he can swing entire matches, his presence on the field fundamentally changing how both players approach combat. He is win condition and defensive anchor, game changer and game ender. His synergies extend throughout skeleton-based strategies. Pair him with Witch, and her skeleton spawning feeds his resurrection ability, creating exponentially growing undead armies. Use him with Graveyard, and fallen graveyard skeletons can be resurrected, extending the spell's impact. Combine him with Skeleton Army, and you have numerical superiority backed by royal authority. Swarms led by their king into glorious battle. The Skeleton King also introduced champion cycle mechanics to the game. Once deployed, he must be defeated and respawn before you can deploy him again. This creates risk-reward decisions around when to commit your champion. Deploy him too early, and he might die without extracting full value, forcing you to wait through respawn timer during crucial moments. Deploy him too late, and you've left powerful tool unused, potentially losing matches you could have won. Mastering champion timing separates skilled players from merely competent ones. In terms of lore significance, the Skeleton King represents culmination of skeleton evolution in Clash Royale. From common 3 skeleton card, to epic skeleton army to legendary Night Witch, and now champion Skeleton King, skeletons have climbed the rarity ladder, proving their worth at every tier. The King embodies everything skeleton lore represents: persistence despite fragility, power through numbers, dignity despite being literal bones, and the refusal to accept that death is the end. His existence also raises questions about skeleton society and hierarchy. If there's a king, is there a kingdom? Do other skeletons serve him willingly or through compulsion? When you deploy skeletons or skeleton army, are you calling forth the king's subjects, or are these independent warrior bands? Does the witch answer to the Skeleton King, or are they rivals, competing powers within the undead realm? The game doesn't answer, but these questions fuel fan discussions and creative works. The Skeleton King's emotes add personality beyond what gameplay reveals. He has expressions of joy, frustration, cockiness, and determination. These emotional displays humanize him despite his decidedly inhuman nature. He's not merely a powerful game piece, but a character with feelings, reactions, personality. This emotional depth makes his connection to Larry feel stronger, as both display that crucial trait, character that transcends their undead nature. Community content around the Skeleton King often explores his royal duties and relationships with other skeleton units. Animations show him leading skeleton armies into battle, not from the back, but from the front, club swinging with regal authority. Comics depict his coronation, possibly showing Larry's transformation or simply celebrating the king's existence. Fan theories connect him to every other skeleton-related card, building elaborate mythologies around the Skeleton Kingdom and its ruler's role within it. As Sleep claims you more completely, envision the Skeleton King on his throne. Not a physical throne in some castle, but a throne of bones assembled from countless fallen skeletons who served before him. He sits with crown gleaming, club resting against his shoulder, surveying his domain of death and battle. Around him, skeletons bow, skeletons train, skeletons prepare for the next deployment. He rises when battle calls, moving with purpose and power that lesser skeletons cannot match. His very presence inspires his subjects, transforms frightened bones into confident warriors. When he activates Soul Gathering, death itself becomes his servant, corpses rising at his command, everything that falls becoming his to command. He's the alpha and omega of skeleton existence, the beginning and end, the Larry who was and the king who is. Let him rule your dreams tonight, this monarch of bones. Let his authority ensure your rest remains undisturbed. What nightmares would dare approach when the Skeleton King stands guard? What fears could penetrate his royal protection? Sleep under his crowned shadow, safe in knowledge that skeleton royalty watches over you, ready to resurrect any who would threaten your peace, converting your enemies into loyal undead servants. The Skeleton King represents achievement, the possibility that even the smallest among us might someday rule. Larry, if the theory holds, went from touching things he shouldn't to wearing a crown and commanding death itself. That's a journey worth celebrating, a transformation that inspires. And even if Larry and the Skeleton King are separate entities, the King still embodies skeleton potential realized, the absolute peak of what animated bones might achieve. He is the skeleton finally given his due, elevated from common to champion, from disposable distraction to game-changing presence. He proves that skeletons aren't merely tools, but characters with depth, with lore, with significance beyond their elixir cost. The Skeleton King reigns eternal, and under his rule, skeletons have claimed their rightful place among Clash Royale's greatest legends. Lost and Crowned, the animated adventure that defined Larry on August 9th, 2021, Supercell released Lost and Crowned, an animated short that would become foundational to skeleton lore in Clash Royale. This beautifully crafted film, running approximately 3 minutes, tells the story of Larry and his brother Peter working for the Red King in the arena. The narrative that unfolds is simple yet profound, combining comedy, adventure, and character development into a package that resonates far beyond its brief runtime. The short opens with Larry and Peter performing maintenance work in the Red King's castle or arena facilities. They're janitors, essentially, skeletons given the unglamorous job of keeping things clean and functional. This immediately establishes them as everyman characters, workers rather than warriors, skeletons with jobs beyond battle. It humanizes them, showing that skeleton existence includes mundane duties alongside glorious combat. Larry's attention is immediately drawn to the Red King's crown, glittering golden atop the monarch's head. Larry has always been characterized by curiosity, that same impulse that led him to touch the Archer Tower in the original commercial. Here, that curiosity fixates on the crown, that symbol of authority and power that sits tantalizingly visible, yet completely inaccessible to a simple cleaning skeleton. You can see in Larry's body language, in the tilt of his skull, in his reaching gestures, that he wants that crown desperately. What follows is a comedy of errors driven by skeleton determination and questionable decision-making. Larry manages to steal the crown, though the exact mechanism varies between different viewer interpretations of the rapid sequences. With crown in hand, Larry and Peter must navigate the castle's defensive systems, chambers filled with traps designed to protect valuable items from thieves. The fact that the crown was improperly secured before they stole, it raises interesting questions about the Red King's security, protocols, or perhaps his trust in his skeleton employees. The Fire Spirit sequence provides some of the animation's most memorable moments. Larry and Peter encounter fire spirits, those small explosive elementals that hover and burn with manic energy. The skeleton's attempts to avoid or neutralize the fire spirits result in cascading chaos, explosions triggering more explosions, flames spreading through chambers and chain reactions of fiery destruction. The animation quality shines here, with fluid movements and dynamic camera angles that create genuine tension despite the comedic tone. Peter proves himself a loyal brother throughout the ordeal, staying with Larry despite the increasingly dangerous situations Larry's theft has created. This brotherly bond adds emotional weight to the narrative. These aren't just two random skeletons. They're family, connected by something deeper than simply being spawned by the same witch. Their relationship suggests that skeletons have social structures, family bonds, relationships that matter beyond mere unit deployment. The dragon's lair represents the adventure's climax. Having escaped the fire spirits and navigated countless traps, Larry and Peter find themselves in a chamber dominated by a massive dragon, possibly a juvenile or sleeping dragon that suddenly awakens. The scale contrast is powerful. Two tiny skeletons, one wearing a stolen crown, facing a creature that could incinerate them with a single breath. Yet they persist, somehow surviving through combination of luck, quick thinking, and skeletal resilience. The crown becomes damaged during the dragon encounter, dented or cracked depending on how you interpret the visual damage shown. This detail becomes crucial for theories about Larry's eventual transformation into the Skeleton King. The crown's damage might have released magic, altered its properties, or simply made it wearable for a skeleton, whereas the perfect crown would have been too large or incompatible with skeletal anatomy. Eventually, Larry and Peter manage to return the crown to the Red King, though it's no longer in pristine condition. The king's reaction is disappointment rather than fury, suggesting he has some fondness for his skeleton employees despite their criminal behavior. The punishment is gentle by royal standards. Larry and Peter are assigned to dishwashing duty, a demotion from their previous janitorial roles, but hardly cruel and unusual punishment for crown theft and castle destruction. The final scenes show Larry and Peter washing dishes together, banter between them suggesting they don't particularly regret their adventure despite its consequences. They're together, they survived, they experienced something beyond their normal existence. The crown theft, the chase, the dragon, all of it created memories and stories worth more than the punishment they received. It's a satisfying conclusion that acknowledges consequences while maintaining the lighthearted tone throughout. Lost and Crowned achieves several crucial things for Clash Royale's lore. First, it established Larry and Peter as distinct characters with personalities, relationships, and agency. They're not merely game pieces, but beings who make choices, albeit questionable ones. Second, it showed skeleton society beyond battle, revealing that skeletons have jobs, hierarchies, and lives that extend past the 3 seconds they typically survive in arena combat. Third, it created narrative foundation for the Skeleton King theory, providing origin story for how a simple skeleton might obtain the crown that would transform or mark him as royalty. The animation quality itself deserves recognition. The movements are fluid and expressive, giving the skeletons impressive range of body language despite lacking faces capable of detailed expression. The environments are richly detailed, showing the Red King's castle as lived in space rather than abstract background. The action sequences are dynamic and well choreographed, maintaining clarity even during chaotic moments. It's professional-grade animation that respects the source material while elevating it. The short's soundtrack complements the action perfectly, with music that swells during dramatic moments and softens during character beats. Sound effects are satisfying, from the clatter of skeleton bones to the whoosh of fire spirits to the dragon's intimidating presence. Even without dialogue beyond occasional skeletal noises, the audio design communicates everything necessary for understanding the narrative and emotional beats. Community response to Lost and Crowned was overwhelmingly positive. Fans celebrated seeing beloved characters receive proper animated treatment. The short was analyzed frame by frame, with viewers discovering small details and Easter eggs hidden throughout. It inspired fan art, fan fiction, and extensive discussions about its implications for Clash Royale lore. Supercell had created something that transcended marketing, becoming genuine entertainment that enriched player connection to the game. The short also raised interesting questions that remain unanswered. Why did Larry want the crown so badly? Was it simple kleptomania, the same impulse that made him touch the Archer Tower? Or did he sense something about the crown, some connection or destiny that drew him to it? Why did Peter help him despite knowing it was wrong? Brotherhood? Or does he also feel the crown's pull, supporting Larry's quest even if he doesn't fully understand it? What happened to the crown after Larry and Peter returned it? Did the Red King have it repaired? Did he discard it as damaged? Or, as the Skeleton King theory suggests, did Larry manage to keep it after all, perhaps as partial payment for his labor? or through another theft we never witnessed. The animation doesn't show us, leaving these crucial plot points open for interpretation and speculation. The dragon's role also invites questions. Why was a dragon living in the Red King's castle? Is it a pet? A prisoner? A guard? Does it relate to other dragon cards in the game, like Baby Dragon or Inferno Dragon? Or is it unique, an individual creature whose story intersects with Lari's just this once? The animation treats the dragon as obstacle rather than character, but its presence suggests depths to arena world building that other content only hints at. Lost and Crowned exists in a peculiar narrative space. It's clearly part of Clash Royale's official lore, released by Supercell through official channels. Yet it's also somewhat divorced from the game itself, telling a story that doesn't directly connect to gameplay mechanics or match outcomes. It's world building, character development, lore enrichment that asks nothing of players except that they watch and enjoy. This willingness to create content that exists for its own sake, rather than serving immediate game promotion, demonstrates Supercell's investment in their universe. The short has been used in promotional campaigns, appearing in advertisements and social media posts. But it's also become something players seek out independently, something they share with friends who don't play Clash Royale, something that stands as entertainment regardless of game knowledge. A well-crafted story with appealing characters transcends its original purpose, becoming a cultural artifact that outlives its marketing intent. As you drift deeper into dreams, let Lost and Crowned play in your mind. See Larry reaching for that glittering crown, unable to resist despite knowing consequences await. Watch Peter loyally following his brother into danger, their bond stronger than common sense. Feel the heat of fire spirit explosions, the terror of the dragon's chamber, the relief when they survive against all odds. Experience their adventure, their choices, their punishment, their ultimate acceptance that some experiences are worth any price. Larry and Peter's story reminds us that curiosity, while dangerous, leads to adventures worth having. That loyalty to those we care about matters more than following rules. That consequences, while unavoidable, can be survived and even embraced. That simple skeletons can have complex motivations, can want things beyond their assigned roles, can dream of crowns even when they know crowns aren't meant for creatures like them. Lost and Crowned gave skeletons depth, narrative, the beginning of mythos that players would build upon for years to come. It transformed Larry from meme into protagonist, from running joke into hero of his own story. And in doing so, it elevated all skeletons, showed that even the most disposable units in the game could be characters worth caring about, worth creating content around, worth dreaming about as Sleep finally claims you fully. Tombstone and skeleton spawners. Buildings that bleed bones. Not all skeletons enter the arena through direct deployment. Some emerge from structures, spawn continuously by buildings that serve as skeletal factories, producing warriors at regular intervals until destroyed or time expires. The Tombstone, introduced early in Clash Royale's history, represents the classic skeleton spawner, a building that creates tactical advantages through persistent troop generation rather than direct damage or defensive mechanics. The Tombstone unlocks from Bone Pit, appropriately Arena 2, and costs 3 elixir to deploy. It's a rare building card that spawns skeletons at regular intervals throughout its 30-second lifetime. The building itself appears as a weathered gravestone, cracked and ancient, emanating purple necromantic energy that marks it as more than mere stone. The visual design immediately communicates its purpose. This is where skeletons come from, the literal tombstone from which the undead rise. Every 2.9 seconds, the Tombstone spawns one skeleton, continuing this production until the building is destroyed or its lifetime expires. Additionally, when destroyed, the Tombstone spawns 4 skeletons as a death spawn, similar to the Night Witch's posthumous bat production. This ensures that even successful destruction of the Tombstone rewards the deploying player with additional skeletons. extracting final value from the elixir investment. The historical evolution of Tombstone reveals constant adjustments aimed at keeping it relevant without making it oppressive. When Clash Royale launched on January 4th, 2016, the Tombstone spawned skeletons every 2.9 seconds and cost 3 elixir, stats that have remained relatively stable throughout the game's history. However, numerous tweaks to spawn timing, hit points, lifetime, and death spawn have refined how the building functions in practice. The May 18, 2016 balance update increased Tombstone hit points by 8%, making it slightly more durable against damage. The July 4, 2016 update decreased its hit points by 11%, reverting some of the earlier buff after data showed it had become too strong defensively. The January 23, 2017 update increased its lifetime from 40 seconds to 60 seconds while decreasing hit points by 30%, fundamentally changing its role from durable structure to fragile but long-lasting spawner. Later updates continued the refinement process. The June 12, 2017 balance update decreased lifetime from 60 seconds back to 40 seconds while increasing hit points, trying to find optimal balance between duration and durability. The October 9, 2017 update decreased spawn speed from 2.9 seconds to 2.5 seconds, making it spawn skeletons faster, but reducing its lifetime to 30 seconds. Each change affected how players used Tombstone and how opponents countered it, creating evolving strategies around this seemingly simple building. The death spawn mechanic has also been adjusted multiple times. Originally spawning 4 skeletons, it was reduced to 3 at one point, then increased back to 4. The timing of the death spawn, whether skeletons appear immediately or after a brief delay, has been fine-tuned to prevent exploitation while maintaining the mechanic's value. These adjustments reflect Supercell's ongoing effort to make Tombstone useful without making it frustrating to face. Strategically, Tombstone excels as a distraction building that provides continuous value through skeleton spawning. Against single-target troops like Prince, Hog Rider, or Mini P.E.K.K.A., the Tombstone pulls them toward the center of your side while spawning skeletons that surround and attack. Even after the building falls, the death spawn provides additional distraction and damage. For 3 elixir, you receive significant defensive value if the building survives long enough to spawn multiple skeleton waves. The building's placement is crucial for maximizing effectiveness. Plant it too close to the river, and it becomes vulnerable to direct tower damage or spells. Place it too far back, and enemy troops might ignore it, targeting towers directly. The optimal placement varies by opponent deck and troop composition, requiring players to adapt positioning based on threats they're facing. Mastering Tombstone placement separates players who extract maximum value from those who waste its potential. Tombstone also functions as spell bait in certain deck archetypes. If opponents hold Fireball, Rocket, or Poison specifically to eliminate your Tombstone, they can't use those spells on your Goblin Barrel, 3 Musketeers, or other valuable targets. You create decision points where opponents must choose which threat to spell and which to handle through other means. This mind game element adds strategic depth beyond the building's simple skeleton spawning function. In beatdown strategies, Tombstone can support pushes by providing continuous skeleton reinforcements. Place it behind your tank, and it spawns skeletons throughout the push's development, adding their damage to your accumulated death ball. The building stays safely behind your advancing troops, protected from direct assault while churning out warriors. This transforms a defensive structure into offensive support, demonstrating Tombstone's versatility. The lore implications of Tombstone are dark and fascinating. This building literally spawns skeletons from a grave, suggesting that beneath the arena ground lie countless buried bones waiting for necromantic magic to call them forth. The Tombstone serves as portal or conduit, connecting the surface world with whatever realm the dead inhabit. Each skeleton that emerges has been summoned from that realm, pulled through the stone into temporary service. Does each tombstone contain specific skeletons, individual warriors bound to particular graves? Or does it tap into a general pool of available undead, summoning whoever answers the call? Are the skeletons spawned from tombstone different from those spawned by witches or deployed directly? The game treats them identically in terms of stats and behavior, but lore-wise, their origins might differ significantly, affecting their nature even if not their combat performance. The death spawn raises especially interesting questions. When the tombstone is destroyed, why do 4 skeletons emerge? Is this a final desperate measure? The building releasing all remaining undead in one burst? Or is it the opposite? The destruction breaking the seals that kept most skeletons contained, allowing a few to escape? Perhaps the tombstone as destruction creates conditions where the boundary between Death's realm and the arena thins momentarily, permitting skeletons to cross over without full ritual or sustained magic. Community creativity around Tombstone includes strategies, guides, and humorous content about its role in matches. Montages show perfect tombstone placements that single-handedly stop massive pushes, the building spawning just enough skeletons at just the right moments to overwhelm attackers. Memes celebrate the frustration of opponents who spell the tombstone only to face the death spawn skeletons anyway, extracting value even in destruction. Discussions debate optimal placement for different scenarios, building collective knowledge around maximizing this 3 elixir building. The tombstone has been featured in various special game modes and challenges. In draft challenges, it becomes a valuable pick for its defensive versatility and low cost. In triple elixir mode, multiple tombstones can be deployed, creating skeleton production rates that overwhelm through sheer numbers. In challenges where buildings are buffed or receive special properties, Tombstone becomes even more powerful, sometimes dominating the temporary meta until the mode ends. Professional players have utilized Tombstone in tournament decks when the meta favored its defensive capabilities. It's been part of various archetypes, cycle decks appreciating its low cost, defensive decks valuing its distraction potential, and beatdown decks leveraging its spawning for push support. Its usage statistics ebb and flow with balance changes and meta shifts, but it never completely disappears, always finding relevance in some players' strategy. The building's visual design has been refined over Clash Royale's history. The gravestone itself has received updated textures, making weathering and cracks more detailed. The purple necromantic energy has been enhanced, making it more visible and thematically consistent with other skeleton-related cards. The skeleton spawn animation has been polished, ensuring smooth emergence from the ground rather than jarring materialization. These aesthetic improvements enhance player experience without changing fundamental gameplay. Other skeleton spawners exist in Clash Royale beyond Tombstone, though they're fewer than one might expect given how popular skeletons are. The graveyard spell continuously spawns skeletons in a targeted area, functioning as offensive spawner rather than defensive building. The Witch and Night Witch spawn skeletons and bats respectively while moving, making them mobile spawners rather than static buildings. Each spawner type offers different strategic applications, different ways of leveraging continuous troop generation. The absence of additional skeleton spawner buildings is notable. Why doesn't Clash Royale have a skeleton barracks or bone tower or crypt? Perhaps Supercell felt Tombstone adequately filled the skeleton spawner niche. Or perhaps they worried about oversaturating the game with skeleton-generating cards. Alternatively, future updates might introduce new spawners as the game evolves, though predicting content releases is always speculative. As your consciousness fades deeper into sleep, picture the Tombstone standing vigil in the arena, that ancient grave marker, weathered by countless battles, glowing with purple energy that pulses like a heartbeat. Every few seconds, the ground before it shifts and cracks, bones emerging from below, assembling into skeletal warriors that immediately scramble toward their duties. The cycle continues endlessly. Death feeding life feeding death in perpetual rotation. The tombstone represents permanence in impermanence. The building itself eventually falls or expires, but while it stands, it creates. It takes death, that ultimate ending, and transforms it into beginning, into continuous generation of warriors who fight despite having already fallen once. It's philosophical commentary disguised as game mechanic, even from graves. From the absolute conclusion, new possibilities emerge. Let the tombstone guard your dreams tonight. Let it spawn skeletal sentinels who patrol the boundaries of your rest, ensuring nothing disturbs the peace you've earned. Every few seconds, new guardians emerge, replacing those who fell defending you, maintaining constant watch that never wavers because the source never depletes. The grave gives endlessly, the dead serve eternally, and you sleep soundly knowing that from the tombstone's magic, protection flows without end. The building that bleeds bones, the grave that grants warriors, the stone that spawns soldiers. Tombstone is all these things and more, a 3 elixir investment that pays dividends in distraction, damage, and defensive depth. It stands where you place it, spawning skeletons until destruction or expiration, then spawning 4 more for good measure, ensuring that even in defeat, it contributes. That's skeleton philosophy in architectural form. Persist, provide value, and when you finally fall, make certain you take something with you. Skeleton Barrel. Airborne delivery of rattling chaos on October 9th, 2017. Clash Royale introduced a card that combines skeletons with aerial mobility in a way no previous card had achieved. The Skeleton Barrel, a common card unlocked from Jungle Arena, which is Arena 9, costs 3 elixir and deploys a barrel carried by 2 balloons that, when destroyed or reaching its target, drops 8 skeletons to wreak havoc below. Is the skeleton equivalent of the Goblin Barrel, trading surprise tower damage for overwhelming skeleton swarm delivered from above. The visual design of Skeleton Barrel immediately communicates its purpose. A wooden barrel, weathered and cracked, hangs suspended beneath 2 purple balloons. The balloons match the color scheme of all skeleton-related cards, that signature purple that marks them as products of dark magic. Inside the barrel, if you look closely during brief moments before deployment or destruction, you can see skeletons packed tightly, waiting for their aerial journey to conclude so they can begin their ground assault. The barrel itself appears fragile, held together by rusted metal bands that look like they might fall apart at any moment. This fragility is reflected in gameplay, as the Skeleton Barrel has very low hit points, dying to most damaging spells and quickly eliminated by defensive troops. But this fragility serves design purpose, making the barrel high-risk, high-reward card that requires skill and timing rather than being automatically effective. When deployed, the Skeleton Barrel moves toward targeted building or the nearest Princess Tower if no building is specified. Its speed is medium, faster than tanks like Giant, but slower than quick troops like Goblins. As it travels, it's vulnerable to air targeting troops and spells, creating opportunities for opponents to destroy it before it reaches valuable positions. But if ignored or inadequately defended, the barrel reaches its destination and drops its skeletal payload directly onto defenders. Upon destruction, either from damage or reaching its target, the Skeleton Barrel releases 8 skeletons. These skeletons drop simultaneously in a circular formation around where the barrel was when it broke, creating instant surrounding threat to any troops or buildings nearby. 8 skeletons is substantial, more than twice the 3 from the basic Skeletons card, enough to overwhelm single-target troops quickly or deal significant damage to buildings before being cleared. The historical evolution of Skeleton Barrel shows Supercell's struggle to balance this unique card. Upon release, it spawned 8 skeletons and cost 3 elixir, statistics that have remained mostly stable. However, numerous adjustments to the barrel's hit points, death damage, skeleton count, and deployment mechanics have tweaked its power level over the years. The November 20th, 2017 update increased barrel hit points by 14%, making it more likely to reach targets before destruction. The January 24th, 2018 update decreased skeleton count from 8 to 7, reducing the swarm's overwhelming potential. Later updates continued refining the card. The June 4th, 2018 update increased skeleton count back to 8 while adjusting other properties to compensate. The November 5th, 2018 update added death damage to the barrel itself, meaning when it breaks, it deals a small amount of damage before skeletons drop. This change gave Skeleton Barrel additional chip damage potential, even if opponents immediately eliminated the skeletons, making it slightly more reliable as offensive tool. More recent adjustments focused on fine-tuning balance. The April 4th, 2022 update increased barrel hit points by 5%. The June 27th, 2022 update increased death damage by 10%. Each change reflected data showing the card was slightly under or overperforming at various trophy ranges and skill levels. The adjustments were typically minor, suggesting Skeleton Barrel was close to balanced, but needed occasional nudges to maintain optimal power level. Strategically, Skeleton Barrel functions primarily as offensive pressure card that forces opponent responses. Unlike ground troops that can be distracted by buildings or defensive placements, the barrel flies directly toward towers, ignoring most defensive structures. Opponents must have air targeting troops or spells ready to intercept it, or accept the barrel reaching their tower and dropping 8 skeletons directly on their defensive line. The card excels in combination with other threats, creating split-push scenarios or overwhelming opponents who've committed resources elsewhere. Launch a ground assault in one lane, then drop Skeleton Barrel in the other lane, forcing opponents to divide their attention and resources. Or use Skeleton Barrel as follow-up to other attacks, dropping it after opponents use their air targeting defenses on different cards, ensuring the barrel reaches its destination unopposed. Skeleton Barrel also functions as spellbait in spell-heavy metas. If opponents hold arrows, fireball, or zap specifically for your Skeleton Barrel, those spells aren't available for other threats. You can bait the spell with different cards, then deploy Skeleton Barrel, knowing opponents lack efficient answers. This creates rock, paper, scissors scenarios where proper sequencing of cards matters enormously, where knowing what's in opponent's hand determines your deployment decisions. On defense, Skeleton Barrel sees less use but can serve niche purposes. Dropping it on top of enemy troops releases 8 skeletons that immediately surround and attack, similar to how Skeleton Army functions, but delivered from air rather than ground. This can catch opponents off guard, as they're not expecting defensive deployment of what appears to be purely offensive card. The tactic requires precise timing and placement, but can generate positive elixir trades against certain threats. The lore implications of Skeleton Barrel raise amusing questions. Who built this barrel? Who decided that putting skeletons in a barrel suspended by balloons was sensible strategy? The contraption seems almost comedic, like something from a cartoon rather than serious military equipment. Yet it works, delivering undead warriors through aerial means that ground defenses cannot intercept, proving that sometimes ridiculous ideas are strategically sound. Are the skeletons inside the barrel conscious during transit? Do they experience the flight? Feel the wind? See the arena passing below them? Or do they exist in suspended animation, unaware until the barrel breaks and releases them into immediate combat? The game doesn't answer, but imagining 8 skeletons crammed into a barrel, bouncing against each other as balloons carry them toward towers, creates humorous mental image that makes the card more memorable. The balloons themselves carry interesting implications. They're purple, matching skeleton aesthetics, suggesting they might be magical constructs rather than natural balloons filled with hot air or helium. Does necromantic magic power them? Are they spirits bound into balloon form, enslaved to carry skeletal cargo? Or are they simply purple-painted conventional balloons, and we're reading too much into color choices? The ambiguity allows for various interpretations, each adding different flavor to the card's lore. Community content around Skeleton Barrel celebrates its explosive potential and frustrating vulnerability. Montages show perfect barrel placements that drop 8 skeletons directly onto opponent towers, dealing substantial damage before defenders can react. Compilations feature failed attempts where barrels are shot down pathetically short of their targets, wasting 3 elixir on nothing. Guides teach proper timing, positioning, and combination strategies that maximize barrel effectiveness while minimizing wasted deployments. The satisfaction of successful skeleton barrel deployment cannot be overstated. Watching that fragile vessel float toward enemy towers, witnessing opponent panic as they realize they lack answers, seeing the barrel pop and rain skeletons onto defensive troops, then watching those 8 warriors rapidly eliminate defenders and attack the tower. All of it creates emotional payoff that makes the card fun even beyond its competitive viability. Conversely, the frustration of having Skeleton Barrel easily countered is equally memorable. Spending 3 elixir only to watch opponent casually shoot down the barrel before it reaches anything valuable feels terrible, like throwing away resources for no return. This risk-reward dynamic makes Skeleton Barrel polarizing, beloved by some players and avoided by others, depending on their tolerance for high variance outcomes. Professional players have used Skeleton Barrel in competitive decks when metas favored aggressive, multi-lane pressure strategies. It appeared in various hybrid and control decks that leveraged its aerial approach as alternative win condition. Usage statistics show it as a niche card, powerful in right circumstances but not universally strong across all metas. Its effectiveness depends heavily on what cards opponents are running, whether they have reliable air targeting answers or must scramble to defend its approach. The Skeleton Barrel represents innovation in skeleton delivery systems, where Tombstone spawns them from graves and witches summon them through magic. The barrel simply carries them through the air and drops them onto enemies. Its low-tech solution to high-level strategic problem: how to get fragile ground troops past ground defenses. The answer, apparently, is to put them in a barrel and float them over obstacles. It shouldn't work as well as it does, but that's part of its charm. As sleep takes you further into dreams, imagine the Skeleton Barrel floating through night sky. 2 purple balloons carrying that wooden container, inside which 8 skeletons wait patiently or impatiently for their journey to end. They don't know exactly where they're going or what awaits them. They just know that when the barrel breaks, they'll spill out and fight whatever's there. That's faith. In a way, trust that whoever deployed them chose wisely, that their aerial insertion will place them where they're needed most. Let the Skeleton Barrel drift through your dreams tonight, carrying skeletal guardians to wherever nightmares might spawn. When fears approach, the barrel breaks above them, raining bones and swords and that distinctive rattling laughter. 8 defenders appear instantly, surrounding threats before they can approach, overwhelming through numbers what they lack in individual strength. The barrel is delivery system, and what it delivers is protection, 8-fold security dropped from sky. The airborne assault of rattling chaos, the flying barrel of bones, the purple balloon vessel of violence. Skeleton Barrel is all these things. 3 elixir of potential that either pays off dramatically or fails spectacularly, depending on opponent readiness and your timing. It's Clash Royale at its most volatile, most exciting, most dependent on skill and circumstance rather than raw power. And that makes it perfect for skeletons, those troops that have always been about smart play over brute force. Graveyard, the spell that spawns an endless swarm on November 1st, 2016. Clash Royale introduced a spell unlike any that had come before. The Graveyard, a legendary spell card that costs 5 elixir, doesn't deal direct damage or provide buffs or clear enemy troops. Instead, it summons skeletons, continuously spawning them in a targeted area for 9 seconds, creating what amounts to temporary tombstone that opponents cannot destroy through conventional means. Its skeleton spawning is spell, area denial through continuous undead generation, and it would become one of the game's most distinctive and polarizing cards. The visual presentation of Graveyard is appropriately grim and atmospheric. When cast, the targeted area becomes marked with purple energy, dark magic suffusing the ground. Then, one by one, skeletons begin emerging from that corrupted earth, each appearing with small bursts of necromantic power. The spawning continues throughout the spell's duration, creating steady stream of undead warriors that opponents must continuously address or accept mounting damage. The spell spawns a total of 15 skeletons over its 9-second duration, each skeleton appearing in random position within the spell's radius. This randomness is crucial to Graveyard's design, preventing players from reliably predicting exactly where each skeleton will emerge. Some might spawn directly next to the tower, immediately beginning to attack. Others might appear at the radius edge, requiring precious seconds to walk toward targets. This variance makes each Graveyard deployment unique, creates different scenarios, even when using identical placement. The skeletons spawned by Graveyard are identical to those from other skeleton cards, having the same hit points, damage, and speed. However, their spawning timing follows specific pattern. Skeletons appear approximately every 0.5 seconds, though the exact timing has been adjusted through various balance updates. This rhythm means opponents can't simply ignore the Graveyard, as damage accumulates steadily throughout its duration, but they also can't rely on single defensive action to counter it completely. Graveyard's historical evolution reveals constant struggle with balance, perhaps more than any other spell in Clash Royale. Upon release on November 1st, 2016, it immediately became controversial. Its damage potential was enormous if left uncountered. It felt almost impossible to counter completely due to continuous spawning and spawn randomness. Early Graveyard meta was defined by players either running Graveyard themselves or building decks specifically to counter it, warping the entire competitive scene around single card. The November 14th, 2016 update, mere weeks after release, decreased skeleton spawn count from 21 to 15 and decreased skeleton spawn duration from 10 seconds to 9 seconds. This significant nerf acknowledged the card had been released too powerful, overwhelming defensive capabilities at most skill levels. Even after this adjustment, Graveyard remained strong, requiring careful management from opponents and skillful play from users. Subsequent updates continue tweaking Graveyard's various parameters. The February 13th, 2017 update decreased skeleton level by 1, making them slightly weaker though, still using the same base stats. The June 12th, 2017 update increased deploy time from 1 second to 2 seconds, giving opponents more reaction time before skeletons began spawning. The August 24th, 2017 update decreased skeleton deploy time to 0.5 seconds per skeleton, making the spawning more rapid and continuous rather than staggered. More adjustments followed over the years. The spell's radius was modified, affecting how spread out skeletons appeared. The spawn timing was refined repeatedly, trying to find rhythm that felt fair for both users and opponents. The skeleton levels were adjusted relative to the spell's level, ensuring damage scaled appropriately with upgrades. Each change reflected ongoing attempt to make Graveyard strong enough to justify its 5 elixir cost and legendary rarity without making it oppressively frustrating to face. Strategically, Graveyard functions as a unique win condition that bypasses traditional defensive structures. Unlike troops that can be distracted by buildings or kited with defensive placements, Graveyard spawns directly where you cast it, typically on or very near opponent towers. Opponents must respond with troops or spells, cannot simply redirect the threat. This makes Graveyard excellent against players who rely heavily on buildings for defense, as buildings do nothing to stop spell deployment. The spell excels when combined with tanking troops that absorb tower damage while skeletons work. Place a knight, Valkyrie, or ice golem in front of opponent's tower, then cast Graveyard on that tower. The tank draws tower aggro while skeletons spawn and attack, potentially dealing thousands of damage before opponents can eliminate both the tank and all the skeletons. This tank plus graveyard combination has been Graveyard's primary usage pattern since its release, defining the archetype of Graveyard beatdown. Graveyard also creates psychological pressure. Once opponents know you're running Graveyard, they must play more conservatively, holding defensive troops or spells specifically to counter future Graveyard deployments. This allows you to pressure other lanes or build pushes, knowing opponents are playing around your spell. The threat of Graveyard influences opponent behavior even when the spell isn't being actively used, creating strategic advantage through implied threat alone. Defensive troops that counter Graveyard effectively become more valuable in the meta when Graveyard is popular. Valkyrie, with her spinning area damage, clears skeletons rapidly. Poison spell damages skeletons over time while slowing their attack speed. Archers provide ranged splash that eliminates spawning skeletons. The Graveyard meta becomes partly about which defensive tools are most efficient at clearing continuous skeleton spawns, and deck building adjusts accordingly. The lore implications of Graveyard are perhaps the darkest of all skeleton-related cards. This spell literally transforms ground into Graveyard, corrupting earth with death magic until bones rise unbidden from below. It suggests that beneath every part of the arena lies potential for skeleton spawning, that death is always just a spell away from surfacing. The necromantic power required to cast Graveyard must be immense, greater than what individual witches command, accessing death on more fundamental level. Are the skeletons spawned by Graveyard pulled from actual graves somewhere? Does the spell reach into Death's realm and drag warrior spirits back to physical world, forcing them into newly formed bone bodies? Or does it create skeletons from scratch, assembling them from death energy and arena soil? The spell's name suggests actual Graveyard is created, implying the skeletons were once buried there. Though whether that burial happened centuries ago or moments ago remains unclear. The random spawn positions add to the horror. Skeletons don't emerge in neat lines or organized formations. They erupt chaotically, unpredictably, like ground itself is rejecting them, vomiting them back into the world of the living. This lack of order makes Graveyard feel more like natural disaster than military tactic, more like curse than strategy. It's appropriate, then, that its rarity is legendary, marking it as something beyond normal cards, something that breaks or bends the usual rules. Community response to Graveyard has always been mixed. Players who use it appreciate its unique mechanics and game-winning potential. Players who face it often complain about its randomness, the way lucky spawn positioning can decide matches through variance rather than skill. This polarization has made Graveyard one of Clash Royale's most discussed cards, generating endless debates about whether it is healthy for the game or problematic design that should be reworked or removed. Professional players have built entire careers partially around Graveyard mastery. Tournament specialists who pilot Graveyard decks with incredible precision, reading opponent responses, adapting spell placement to counter defensive positioning, combining Graveyard with exactly right support troops at exactly right moments. Watching professional Graveyard play reveals depths to the card that casual usage doesn't expose, demonstrating that despite randomness, skill expression exists in timing, positioning, and decision-making. The spell has been featured prominently in special challenges and events. Graveyard-focused challenges task players with winning matches using decks built around the spell. Special modes sometimes buff Graveyard, spawning more skeletons or spawning them faster, creating overwhelming undead floods that showcase what the spell could be if balance weren't a concern. These temporary experiences remind players why Graveyard must be carefully balanced, as unbridled skeleton spawning becomes unstoppable quickly. Graveyard's interaction with other cards creates interesting synergies and counters. Freeze spell cast on opponent towers prevents them from targeting spawning skeletons, allowing the undead swarm to deal devastating damage. Rage spell increases skeleton attack speed, making them deal damage faster. Poison cast on opponent defensive troops weakens them while they try to clear skeletons, improving Graveyard's effectiveness. Each combination adds strategic depth, creating deck archetypes built around maximizing Graveyard value through specific card pairings. As Sleep claims you deeper still, envision the Graveyard spell in action. Purple energy marking corrupted ground, then the first skeleton erupting from earth with burst of dark magic. Another appears nearby, then another, each one scrambling immediately toward the nearest tower or troop. The spawning continues relentlessly. 9 seconds of continuous undead generation. 15 skeletons total emerging from ground that shouldn't spawn anything yet does anyway, because magic has transformed it into a literal graveyard. Let Graveyard protect your dreams tonight by turning them into protected zones where nightmares cannot tread. Any fear that approaches gets immediately swarmed by spawning skeletons. 15 defenders emerging to eliminate threats before they reach you. The spell's duration covers you through night's darkest hours, ensuring continuous protection that doesn't falter or fade until rest is complete and morning comes. The spell that spawns an endless swarm, the magic that makes ground itself reject death, the legendary necromancy that summons 15 warriors from 5 elixir and 9 seconds. Graveyard represents skeleton philosophy perfected. Not individual strength, but overwhelming numbers. Not powerful units, but persistent pressure. Not immediate impact, but accumulating damage that eventually becomes unstoppable. It's skeleton essence distilled into spell form. Everything skeletons represent made into targeted effect that opponents must respect or be destroyed by. Skeleton dragons and other bony surprises. While most skeleton lore focuses on ground troops and spawners, Clash Royale has occasionally experimented with skeleton-related cards that break expected patterns. The skeleton dragons, introduced on September 7, 2020, represent one such experiment. Flying skeletons that breathe fire, combining undead nature with draconic abilities in ways that feel both strange and compelling. Though not strictly skeletons in the traditional sense, their skeletal appearance and connection to death magic warrant inclusion in comprehensive skeleton lore. Skeleton dragons appear as a pair of small, skeletal dragon creatures. Their bones are visible beneath tattered, leathery wings. Their skulls dragon-shaped but clearly fleshless. Purple energy glows from their eye sockets, connecting them visually to other skeleton units while their dragon form sets them apart. They're common cards that cost 4 elixir and unlock from training camp, making them accessible early while remaining relevant throughout progression. The most distinctive aspect of skeleton dragons is their attack. They breathe fire in area damage cones, hitting multiple targets with each blast. This gives them splash damage capability from the air, rare combination that makes them valuable against swarms and clustered troops. They're not individually powerful, having relatively low hit points and moderate damage, but together as a pair, they provide reliable area control both offensively and defensively. When skeleton dragons were first introduced, they represented Supercell's attempt to create accessible splash damage air troop, filling niche between expensive cards like Baby Dragon and less reliable options. The community response was generally positive, appreciating the versatility these skeletal flyers provided. However, balance concerns emerged quickly, as their combination of low-cost splash damage and flying made them perhaps too efficient in too many situations. Balance updates followed their release, adjusting hit points, damage, and hit speed to bring skeleton dragons into better equilibrium with other cards. The October 5, 2020 update decreased their damage by 6%. The March 1st, 2021 update decreased their hit points by 3%. These changes were relatively minor, suggesting the card launched close to balanced, but needed fine-tuning rather than major rework. Strategically, skeleton dragons function as versatile support troops that provide aerial splash damage. Behind a tank, they clear swarms that might distract the tank while dealing damage to towers. On defense, they eliminate air swarms like minions or bats while providing ranged area damage against ground troops. Therefore, elixir cost makes them affordable enough to deploy reactively while substantial enough to provide meaningful impact. The lore implications of skeleton dragons are fascinating. Are they actual dragons that died and were resurrected through necromancy? Their flesh rotted away, but their bones animated through dark magic? Or are they artificial constructs, skeleton warriors modified with dragon characteristics through magical experimentation? Their small size suggests they might be young dragons, juveniles who died prematurely and were brought back, trapped in undead state before reaching full maturity. The connection between skeleton dragons and other skeleton units isn't explicitly stated in-game. Do they serve the Skeleton King? Were they created by witches as specialized aerial units? Or do they represent entirely separate faction of undead? Skeletal dragons having their own society and purposes beyond the ground-based skeleton warriors we're more familiar with. The game doesn't clarify, leaving these questions open for interpretation. Beyond skeleton dragons, Clash Royale has hinted at other skeleton-related content through cosmetics, emotes, and seasonal events. Halloween celebrations often feature skeleton-themed content, acknowledging the connection between skeletons and spooky celebrations. Special challenges sometimes modify skeleton spawn rates or behaviors, temporarily transforming the game into skeleton-dominated chaos. These seasonal touches keep skeletons relevant beyond their competitive viability, cementing them as cultural touchstones within the game. Emotes featuring skeletons have been particularly popular. Larry's various expressions, the Skeleton King's reactions, generic skeleton celebrations and frustrations all have been immortalized in emote form. Players use these to communicate, to taunt, to celebrate, to commiserate. Skeleton emotes transcend their original context, becoming universal language among Clash Royale players, regardless of which decks they actually run. Skins and tower cosmetics sometimes feature skeleton themes, allowing players to customize their appearance with undead aesthetics. Skeleton-themed towers, skeleton-decorated arenas, skeleton banners and badges, all available through various progression systems or shop purchases. These cosmetic options demonstrate Supercell's recognition that players love skeletons enough to want them visible beyond just card deployments. The community has also created unofficial skeleton content that has become part of the broader culture around the game. Fan-made skeleton challenges, custom rules that make skeleton cards more powerful or numerous, circulate through social media and friend groups. Players create skeleton-only decks, handicapping themselves competitively for the satisfaction of winning with nothing but bone warriors. These community-driven celebrations of skeleton culture demonstrate how deeply the units have embedded themselves in player consciousness. As your mind drifts through the borderlands between wake and sleep, picture the unexpected skeleton variations. Dragons with skeletal wings breathing fire, guard skeletons with shields and special armor, evolved forms with purple hats and resurrection abilities. Each variant represents different expression of skeleton concept, different answer to question of what else skeletons might become. They're proof that even familiar concepts can surprise, that there's always room for innovation, even within established patterns. Let these bony surprises populate your dreams with unexpected wonder. Let skeleton dragons fly through your mind sky, breathing fire that warms rather than burns. Let new skeleton variants you've never seen materialize in your imagination. Combinations of bones and magic that Supercell hasn't implemented yet, but might someday. The skeleton family continues growing, adding members, surprising us with what warriors made of death can accomplish when given chance to evolve. The strategic evolution of skeleton meta over Clash Royale's long history since its 2016 launch. Skeletons have played vastly different roles in competitive and casual play. The skeleton meta has shifted dramatically through various eras, with these bone warriors rising and falling in prominence based on balance changes, new card introductions, and evolving player strategies. Understanding this evolution reveals not just game history, but how a simple concept, fragile warriors that die easily but cost little, can remain relevant for nearly a decade. In the early days of Clash Royale's 2016 launch, skeletons were immediately recognized as essential cycle cards. The original 4-skeleton deployment for 1 elixir represented incredible value, allowing players to cycle through their decks faster than almost any other option while extracting defensive value. Early competitive players built entire strategies around cycling skeletons and other cheap cards to reach their win conditions repeatedly, establishing the cycle deck archetype that remains viable today. The skeleton army's initial 20-skeleton swarm for 4 elixir dominated early meta, providing defensive capabilities that could stop nearly any ground push. Players quickly learned that having answers to skeleton army was mandatory, not optional. Decks without area damage spells or splash troops struggled against the overwhelming bone tide. This forced diversity in deck building, as pure single-target strategies became unviable when 1, 3, or 4 elixir card could completely shut them down. The reduction of skeletons from 4 to 3 on June 21, 2016 marked the first major skeleton meta shift. Suddenly, the card that had been automatic inclusion in many decks felt slightly less powerful, marginally less capable of completely stopping threats. Some players abandoned it, seeking other cycle options. Others adapted, learning new placement techniques that maximized the value of 3 skeletons instead of 4. The community debated whether the change was necessary or excessive, with passionate arguments on both sides. When skeletons returned to 4 count on February 13, 2017, the community celebrated. The familiar 4-skeleton squad had returned, and players who had maintained faith in the card felt vindicated. But this celebration was short-lived. On November 2, 2017, the count decreased back to 3 permanently, establishing the current standard. By this point, players had experienced both versions extensively and largely accepted that 3 skeletons represented better balance, providing value without being oppressive. The introduction of Graveyard on November 1, 2016 created entirely new skeleton archetypes. Graveyard beatdown decks became competitively viable, combining tanks with Dispel to create overwhelming pressure. Players who had never considered skeleton-focused strategies suddenly found themselves building entire decks around maximizing Graveyard value. The spell's legendary rarity and unique mechanics made it aspirational, something players worked toward unlocking and mastering. Throughout 2017 and 2018, skeleton-based strategies ebbed and flowed with the meta. Log-bait decks, which relied on forcing opponents to use their log on other troops before deploying skeleton army or goblin barrel, became prominent. These decks required careful sequencing and mental tracking of opponent spells, elevating strategic depth. Skeleton Army became not just a defensive card, but a mind game, a threat opponents had to respect even when not deployed. The Night Witch, as May 2017 release and subsequent dominance, created a brief Night Witch meta, where the card appeared in nearly every competitive deck. Her bat spawning, rather than skeleton spawning, technically falls outside pure skeleton lore, but her thematic kinetic connection to dark magic and the witch made her feel like part of the skeleton family. When she was nerfed, skeleton purists felt relief, as the Night Witch's overwhelming power had somewhat overshadowed traditional skeleton strategies. The years 2019 and 2020 saw skeleton strategies remain relevant but not dominant. The introduction of new cards, new mechanics, and continued balance changes meant skeleton decks competed with increasingly diverse strategies. Yet they persisted, their fundamental efficiency ensuring they never completely fell out of favor. Professional players continued piloting skeleton-heavy decks in tournaments, demonstrating that mastery of these simple units could compete with the flashiest new legendary cards. The October 2021 introduction of champions, including the Skeleton King, revitalized skeleton strategies at the highest competitive levels. The Skeleton King's ability to resurrect fallen troops as skeletons created new strategic possibilities. Decks built around maximizing soul collection and resurrection value emerged, with players carefully managing deaths to feed the king's power. The 80 elixir cost made him high risk, high reward, perfectly fitting the skeleton philosophy of extracting maximum value from minimal resources. The Evolution Mechanics October 2022 introduction, with evolved skeletons among the first evolutions, fundamentally changed how players viewed the basic skeleton's card. What had been purely disposable suddenly became potentially immortal, respawning every 4 seconds if they died in your territory. This transformed defensive strategies, as evolved skeletons could be planted once and continuously respawn to counter multiple threats. The meta adapted around this new reality, with players either evolving their own skeletons or building specific counters into their decks. According to recent statistics, Skeleton Army has become one of the most used cards globally, appearing in approximately 18% of all decks above 5,300 trophies. This remarkable statistic demonstrates that nearly 9 years after Clash Royale's launch, skeleton-based strategies remain not just viable, but dominant in many trophy ranges. The 3 elixir cost and potential to shut down major pushes keeps Skeleton Army relevant despite countless new cards and mechanics introduced over the years. The regular Skeletons card maintains strong usage as well, with recent data showing over 30% usage in competitive ranges and a 51% win rate. These statistics prove that 1 elixir cycle cards remain fundamental to Clash Royale strategy. Players continue discovering new ways to extract value from 3 fragile warriors, continuing the tradition established in 2016 of skeleton efficiency defining successful deck building. The Skeleton King has seen significant usage increases in recent seasons, doubling its presence in competitive decks according to seasonal data. This surge correlates with various balance changes and the introduction of new synergistic cards. The King's ability to convert deaths into skeleton reinforcements pairs perfectly with strategies that generate many casualties, creating overwhelming undead swarms that opponents struggle to contain. Graveyard continues finding niches in competitive play, though its usage fluctuates more than simpler skeleton cards. The spell requires specific deck builds and synergies to function optimally, making it more archetype-defining than universally applicable. When Graveyard is strong in the meta, entire deck strategies revolve around it. When it's weak, it nearly disappears from competitive play. This volatility reflects its unique design as win condition rather than support card. Giant Skeleton has experienced perhaps the most dramatic meta journey of any skeleton card. Once a dominant defensive option, it has been buffed and nerfed repeatedly, reworked entirely, and continues searching for stable competitive viability. Recent balance changes, increasing its bomb damage, have restored some relevance, but it remains niche compared to its glory days. The community debates whether Giant Skeleton can ever be properly balanced or if its fundamental design, trading death for massive area damage, is inherently problematic. The meta-evolution of skeletons reflects broader Clash Royale design philosophy. Simple mechanics executed well remain relevant regardless of power creep. While new cards introduce complex abilities and flashy effects, 3 skeletons for 1 elixir continues providing value nearly a decade after launch. This consistency makes skeletons reliable anchors in ever-changing metas. Cards players can trust when everything else is uncertain. Different trophy ranges show different skeleton usage patterns. Lower trophy ranges often feature skeleton army heavily, as newer players lack reliable counters and the overwhelming swarm feels unstoppable. Mid-trophy ranges see more balanced skeleton usage, with players learning proper counters but still respecting skeleton value. High trophy and professional play show sophisticated skeleton deployment, with every placement calculated, every cycle intentional, every skeleton serving specific strategic purpose. Regional differences also affect skeleton meta. Some regions favor aggressive skeleton-heavy strategies, building decks around overwhelming opponents through continuous pressure. Others prefer defensive skeleton usage, holding cards for perfect counterplays rather than proactive deployment. These regional meta differences create interesting dynamics in international tournaments, where players must adapt to unfamiliar strategic philosophies. The seasonal meta shifts keep skeleton strategies evolving. Balance changes each month can dramatically affect skeleton viability, either directly through skeleton card adjustments or indirectly through changes to cards that counter or synergize with skeletons. Players who master skeletal strategies must constantly adapt, learning how each balance update affects their preferred deck archetypes. Looking at win rates over time, skeleton cards have maintained remarkable consistency. While individual cards fluctuate, skeleton cards collectively hover around 50 to 52% win rates, suggesting good overall balance. This consistency is remarkable, given how many cards exist and how dramatically metas shift. It suggests Supercell has successfully balanced skeleton cards to be strong without being oppressive, useful without being mandatory. The professional player perspective on skeletons reveals deep appreciation for their strategic depth. Professional players consistently cite skeleton cards as examples of good game design, where simple mechanics create complex decision trees. When to deploy skeletons, where to place them, which threats to counter with them, all these decisions separate good players from great ones. In professional hands, skeletons become surgical tools, precise instruments that extract maximum value from minimum investment. Content creators have built entire channels partially around skeleton strategies. YouTube guides teaching optimal skeleton deployment generate millions of views. Twitch streamers showcase skeleton-only challenges, handicapping themselves for entertainment. TikTok creators make skeleton-focused content that reaches audiences who don't even play Clash Royale. The cultural impact of skeletons extends beyond the game itself, becoming recognizable symbols even to casual observers. The cycle deck archetype, which relies heavily on skeletons and other cheap cards, has been competitively viable throughout Clash Royale's entire history. This archetype emphasizes quick cycling to your win condition, using cheap cards like skeletons to maintain defensive pressure while constantly rotating through your deck. The consistency of cycle decks across nearly 9 years proves that skeleton-based strategies have fundamental strengths that transcend temporary meta conditions. Skeleton-based strategies represent another enduring archetype. These decks run multiple cards vulnerable to the same spells, forcing opponents into impossible choices. If they log your skeleton army, your goblin barrel gets through. If they save long for goblin barrel, skeleton army wreaks havoc. This rock-paper-scissors dynamic creates engaging gameplay where prediction and psychology matter as much as mechanical skill. The control archetype often incorporates skeletons as defensive tools that transition into counterattacks. After using skeletons to stop an enemy push, the surviving skeletons become offensive threats that must be addressed. This dual-purpose utility makes skeletons valuable in control strategies that emphasize efficiency and conversion of defense into offense. Bridge spam strategies sometimes utilize skeleton barrel as surprise win condition. The barrel has ability to bypass ground defenses and drop 8 skeletons directly on towers creates explosive damage potential. combined with other fast troops like battle ram or bandit. Skeleton barrel becomes part of relentless pressure that overwhelms opponents through speed rather than power. Beatdown strategies, particularly those using golem or giant, often include skeletons for cycling and defensive support. While the main win condition is the big tank, skeletons help reach that tank faster while providing cheap defensive answers that preserve elixir for offensive investments. The supporting role skeletons play in Beatdown demonstrates their versatility across vastly different strategic philosophies. The evolution of skeleton counters has been as important as skeleton evolution itself. Log became nearly mandatory in competitive decks, partially because of its efficiency against skeleton army and other swarms. Zap's instant reset and damage made it valuable for clearing skeletons quickly. Arrows, fireball, poison. Each spell's viability has been partially determined by how effectively it handles skeleton threats. Troop-based counters have also shaped meta. Valkyrie's spinning area damage makes her excellent against skeleton swarms. Bomber's Splash can clear skeletons rapidly. Dart Prince's Charge and Shield give him advantages against skeleton-based strategies. The presence or absence of these counters in meta directly affects how often skeleton strategies appear and succeed. Building placements have evolved to better handle skeleton threats. Players learned optimal positions for buildings to pull and distract skeletons from graveyard or kite giant skeleton away from towers. These placement refinements represent meta knowledge that has accumulated over years, passed down from professional players to casual players through guides, streams, and direct experience. Prediction plays involving skeletons showcase the highest levels of strategic thinking. Predicting opponent's skeleton army deployment and preemptively using log or arrows demonstrates not just mechanical skill, but psychological understanding of opponent patterns. These predictions become mind games themselves, with players faking patterns to bait predictions that can then be punished. The interaction between skeletons and various game mechanics has created interesting strategic wrinkles. Skeletons can activate King Tower if placed correctly against certain attacks, providing permanent defensive advantage. They can be used to test for enemy traps or hidden troops. They can kite building targeting troops into disadvantageous positions. Each interaction adds strategic depth that rewards experience and game knowledge. Tournament meta often differs from ladder meta in how skeletons are deployed. Tournament standard levels create different relative power levels than ladder's level-dependent calculations. Professional players optimize skeleton usage for tournament conditions, sometimes discovering techniques that don't work as well on ladder or vice versa. This creates parallel meta evolution that occasionally converges, but often diverges based on competitive context. The influence of YouTubers and professional players on skeleton meta cannot be overstated. When prominent players showcase successful skeleton strategies, usage rates spike across all levels as players attempt to replicate professional success. This trickle-down effect means professional meta decisions about skeleton usage eventually affect millions of casual players, creating ripple effects throughout the entire player base. Special challenges and limited-time modes often feature modified skeleton mechanics that temporarily reshape meta. Trickle elixir modes make continuous skeleton spawning overwhelming. Draft challenges, where skeletons are premium picks, demonstrate their fundamental value. Special rules that buff specific rarities can make common skeletons temporarily dominant or weak. These temporary metas provide fresh experiences while reinforcing understanding of skeleton strengths and weaknesses. As Sleep claims you deeper, picture the meta evolution as living entity, constantly shifting landscape where skeletons navigate through changing conditions. See them rising in prominence as counters fade, falling as new threats emerge, but never disappearing completely. Watch the pendulum swing between 4 skeletons and 3, between 20 skeleton army and 15, between various spawn rates and costs and mechanics. All adjustments seeking balance that remains eternally elusive because perfect balance might be impossible in complex systems. The strategic evolution of skeleton meta tells story of adaptation, of persistent relevance despite constant change, a fundamental value that transcends temporary power. These bone warriors have marched through 9 years of shifting metas, always finding their place, always mattering to some players and some strategies. That's remarkable longevity that few cards achieve. Testament to elegant design that serves multiple purposes without being mandatory for any. Let the meta history guard your dreams tonight. The endless cycle of buffs and nerfs, the rise and fall of various skeleton strategies, the constant search for optimal usage that drives millions of players to experiment, adapt, and discover. The meta never stops evolving, but skeletons remain constant presence within that evolution. Bones rattling through every era, reminding us that some things persist not through domination, but through being exactly what S needed when it S needed. Community legends, when players became skeleton storytellers. Beyond official content and competitive statistics, skeleton lore has been profoundly shaped by community creators who fell in love with these rattling warriors and dedicated countless hours to celebrating them through various creative mediums. From animations to comics, from fanfiction to custom challenges, the Clash Royale community has transformed skeletons from game pieces into cultural icons with rich, player-generated mythology that rivals and sometimes surpasses official lore. The animation community deserves first recognition for their extraordinary contributions to skeleton lore. Independent animators, some professional and others hobbyist, have created hundreds of skeleton-focused videos that collectively represent thousands of hours of work. These animations range from simple comedic shorts showing hilarious misadventures to elaborate multi-episode series exploring skeleton society and culture. The best of these animations achieve view counts in the millions, sometimes reaching audiences far beyond Clash Royale's player base. One particularly influential animation trend involves Larry's daily life outside of battles. These videos depict Larry and his skeletal friends engaging in mundane activities, shopping for bones, trying to eat food they can't digest, attempting to make friends with non-skeleton troops who find them creepy. The humor comes from treating skeletons as normal people with skeleton-specific problems, creating comedy through contrast between their undead nature and very human desires for connection, purpose, and acceptance. Another animation trend explores darker themes, presenting skeletons as tragic figures trapped in cycles of death and resurrection. These more serious works question the ethics of necromancy, explore what consciousness means for animated bones, and contemplate whether skeletons suffer or simply exist without capacity for suffering. While less popular than comedic content, these philosophical animations demonstrate the creative community's willingness to engage deeply with skeleton lore's implications. The comic and illustration community has been equally prolific. Artist platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and DeviantArt host thousands of skeleton-themed Clash Royale artworks. Some present skeletons in epic battle scenes, portraying them as heroic warriors despite their fragility. Others focus on cute, chibi-style interpretations that emphasize skeletons' endearing qualities. Still others create dark, gothic pieces that lean into death magic aesthetics, presenting skeletons as genuinely eerie rather than comical. Long-form comic series following skeleton characters have developed dedicated followings. These comics develop original characters, create ongoing narratives, and build worlds where skeletons have personalities, relationships, and agency beyond their game roles. Some comics are strictly canon compliant, working within established Clash Royale lore. Others take wild liberties, creating alternate universes where skeletons rule kingdoms, fight interdimensional wars, or run surprisingly successful businesses. Fan fiction represents another massive category of community skeleton content. Archive sites host thousands of Clash Royale stories, and skeletons appear prominently in many. Some stories explore Larry's transformation into the Skeleton King, filling narrative gaps that official content leaves open. Others create romance between skeleton characters and other troops, somehow making relationships between undead warriors and living beings feel genuine and emotionally resonant. The shipping community, which pairs characters in romantic relationships, has enthusiastically embraced skeleton characters. Larry and various other characters have been shipped in countless stories and artworks, with creators finding ways to depict romance despite anatomical challenges inherent in skeleton-involved relationships. These works range from wholesome and innocent to explicitly adult, demonstrating the full spectrum of fan creation across all content rating levels. Theory crafting represents more analytical community engagement with skeleton lore. Dedicated fans compile every skeleton-related detail from official sources, building elaborate theories about skeleton origins, purposes, and futures. The Larry to Skeleton King theory, discussed extensively in earlier sections, emerged entirely from community observation and speculation before any official confirmation or denial. These theories spread through forums, Discord servers, and Reddit threads, gaining adherents and skeptics in equal measure. The custom challenge community has created skeleton-specific game modes that push skeleton strategies to extremes. Skeleton-only challenges, where players can use only skeleton cards, demonstrate the versatility of bone-based strategies. Triple skeleton spawning modes that make witches and tombstones produce skeletons 3 times as fast, create overwhelming undead floods that completely change gameplay. These custom modes, shared through friend challenges, provide fresh experiences that official Supercell modes don't offer. YouTube creators have built substantial followings partially through skeleton-focused content. Challenge videos, where creators attempt to reach specific trophy counts using only skeleton cards, attract hundreds of thousands of views. Theory videos explaining skeleton lore and connections generate passionate comment discussions. Compilation videos showing the best skeleton plays from professional matches serve both entertainment and educational purposes, teaching viewers advanced techniques while celebrating skeleton versatility. Twitch streamers engage with skeleton lore through live interaction with their audiences. Chat members spam skeleton emotes, request skeleton-only matches, donate specifically to fund skeleton deck upgrades. Streamers create skeleton-themed channel points rewards, skeleton sub-badges, skeleton donation alerts. The live format allows real-time community building around shared appreciation for skeletal warriors, creating spaces where skeleton enthusiasm is celebrated rather than mocked. TikTok has become increasingly important for short-form skeleton content. Quick animations showing Larry's reaction to various game situations go viral regularly. Skeleton memes spread rapidly through the platform's algorithm, reaching casual mobile game audiences who might never watch longer YouTube content. TikTok creators have developed distinct skeleton content styles that work within the platform's constraints, maximizing impact in videos under 60 seconds. The cosplay community has even embraced skeleton characters, though creating convincing skeleton costumes presents unique challenges. Dedicated cosplayers have constructed full skeleton armor, complete with glowing purple eyes, short swords, and attention to detail that honors the source material. Convention photos show skeleton cosplayers alongside Clash Royale's more traditionally bodied characters, proving that dedicated fans will represent their favorite troops regardless of difficulty. The music community has created skeleton-themed songs and remixes. Original compositions celebrating Larry and his friends mix game sound effects with actual instruments, creating surprisingly catchy tracks. Remixes of Clash Royale's soundtrack incorporate skeleton sound effects, the rattling bones becoming percussion elements. Some creators have even written and performed full ballads telling skeleton stories, complete with lyrics exploring their undead existence. Meme culture around skeletons has become self-sustaining. Each new skeleton-related update spawns waves of memes. Balance changes generate memes about buffed or nerfed skeletons crying or celebrating. New skeleton cards inspire memes comparing them to existing variants. Skeleton interactions with other cards become meme templates used for situations completely unrelated to Clash Royale. The skeleton as meme transcends the skeleton as game piece. The competitive community contributes through detailed statistical analysis and strategic guides. Players compile data on skeleton usage rates, win rates, optimal placements, and synergies. They create tier lists ranking skeleton cards. They write comprehensive guides teaching everything from basic skeleton mechanics to advanced techniques that only top players execute consistently. This analytical content helps players improve while deepening understanding of why skeletons remain competitively relevant. Community tournaments specifically celebrating skeleton strategies have been organized through various platforms. These events require participants to use skeleton-heavy decks, proving themselves through bone-based battle. Prize pools, though typically modest, demonstrate community willingness to invest resources in celebrating skeletons. Winners gain recognition within niche communities that value skeleton mastery above all else. The Discord server ecosystem contains numerous skeleton-dedicated spaces. These servers host discussions about skeleton lore, share skeleton content, organize skeleton tournaments, and simply provide gathering places for players who appreciate these fragile warriors more than any other aspect of Clash Royale. Some servers have hundreds or thousands of members, creating substantial communities united by skeletal enthusiasm. Language communities have adapted skeleton lore to their cultural contexts. Japanese fan content incorporates anime aesthetics and storytelling conventions. Spanish language creators add cultural flavor that differs from English content while maintaining core skeleton appreciation. Chinese fan content sometimes blends skeleton lore with local gaming culture and preferences. This global diversity enriches skeleton lore, showing how universal skeleton appeal transcends linguistic and cultural barriers. The community has also created physical merchandise independently of Supercell's official products. Custom t-shirts, stickers, phone cases, and artwork featuring skeleton characters are sold through print-on-demand services. While these operate in legal gray areas regarding intellectual property, they demonstrate demand for skeleton merchandise that official channels don't fully satisfy. Fans want to wear their skeleton appreciation literally, displaying allegiance to Larry and his friends in daily life. Perhaps most touchingly, the community has created charity initiatives around skeleton themes. Fundraising streams where donations unlock skeleton-only challenges. Charity tournaments where entry fees go to good causes. Awareness campaigns using skeleton characters to promote various social issues. All demonstrate how community appreciation for skeletons extends beyond mere entertainment into real-world positive impact. The educational content created by community members helps new players understand skeleton strategies. From basic deployment tips to advanced kiting techniques, from counterplay guides to synergy explanations, community educators have built comprehensive curricula around skeleton mastery. This knowledge transfer ensures that each new generation of players learns from previous generations' accumulated wisdom. Community contests and challenges keep skeleton engagement fresh. Screenshot competitions for best skeleton deployment, replay contests for most creative skeleton play, art competitions celebrating skeleton aesthetics. All these community-organized events maintain enthusiasm while showcasing talented community members. Winners gain recognition that encourages continued creation and participation. The role-playing community has created extensive skeleton backstories and personalities. Detailed character profiles for Larry, Harry, Gary, Terry, and Mary establish their relationships, motivations, and personal histories. Some role players create original skeleton characters that exist alongside canon skeletons, expanding the skeleton family through collaborative storytelling. These role-playing exercises develop narrative skills while celebrating skeleton characters in deeply personal ways. Modding communities, though less prevalent for mobile games than PC games, have created skeleton-focused modifications where possible. Custom skins that change skeleton appearances, modified game files that adjust skeleton stats for personal enjoyment, fan-made skeleton games inspired by, but separate from Clash Royale, all demonstrate technical community members' dedication to skeleton celebration through code and design. The archive and preservation community ensures skeleton content remains accessible. Dedicated fans download and save skeleton videos, artwork, and stories, protecting them against potential deletion or platform closures. These digital archivists understand that community-created content represents valuable cultural artifacts worth preserving for future skeleton enthusiasts who might discover these warriors years from now. As sleep deepens, picture this vast community of creators and fans. Millions of people across the world who saw 3 small skeletons in a mobile game and decided they mattered enough to create around, to build upon, to celebrate through countless creative works. Animation studios, art galleries, fiction archives, all built on foundation of skeleton appreciation, all proving that community passion can rival official content in depth, breadth, and impact. Let their creativity inspire your dreams tonight. Let fan animations play in your mind's theater. Let community theories about skeleton origins weave narratives in your sleeping thoughts. Let the sheer volume of creative works dedicated to celebrating bones and swords and purple eyes remind you that sometimes the most unlikely things become beloved precisely because they re so simple, so humble, so genuinely themselves. The community made skeletons legends not because Supercell demanded it, but because something about these fragile warriors resonated so deeply that millions couldn't help but create, share, discuss, and celebrate. That's organic cultural phenomenon, authentic appreciation that no marketing campaign could manufacture. The community saw Larry touch that Archer Tower and collectively decided, yes, this skeleton matters to us. And in making that decision, they ensured he always would. Rest now, knowing that while you sleep somewhere in the world, a community member is creating new skeleton content, drawing Larry in new situations, writing stories about skeleton adventures, theorizing about skeleton futures. The community never sleeps, constantly producing, constantly celebrating, constantly ensuring that skeleton lore grows richer with each passing day. They are the true keepers of skeleton legend, and their dedication ensures these bone warriors will rattle through gaming culture for generations to come.